Hi, Megan. How are you? Welcome, welcome. Come on in, everyone. All right. Wow, this light is on really bright today. Hi, Esther. Hi, Megan. Hi, Sabrina. Welcome, Ellen. Okay. Ooh, who's that with you, Megan? Hi, whoever's sitting on Megan's lap. Nice to see you. Can you hear me, Megan? I don't think you can hear me because no one's reacting over there. Hi, Sabrina.
Hi.
Let everyone in. Megan, can you hear me? If you can't hear me, write in the chat.
Yes,
Oh,
I
you
can
can
hear
oh,
you now.
There you go.
I had my sound off for a moment. We have an extra participant who's home from school today.
Oh no.
Aw.
Well, hi. Thanks for joining us. How cute is that? The other day we spent the whole math class with someone's cat on their laps and walking over the keyboard.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, guys, come on in, letting everyone in. For those of you who are already here, make sure to get into the chat and give me your good old hey ho to let me know you're here. And we have, there you go. Hold on. Okay, perfect. So if you're on VDI, make sure to keep signing, start doing all your sign in and renewing your Google Drive. I think Linda, she's not here yet. Who's left here that's on VDI still?
I am.
Ken and Linda. And who else is on VDI? I believe Ken, Linda, and Saul. Saul's at the dentist. And then no, Bonnie is traveling. So we're not gonna have her today. All right. Hi, Alan. Hi, Monica. All right, guys. So we have a guest today visiting us, Esther, and I don't know where she shows up in your little scheme of things, but since she showed up early, she's at the top right, Esther Frankel. She's a colleague of mine, and we are all doing observations and evaluations of each other's classes. So she's in here with us for the first hour or so of today's class. And hey, Esther, if you want to get on VDI and join us,
Hi everyone, how you doing?
you're welcome to get on VDI and hang in with us.
Great.
Other than that, we are going to just you know, ignore her, so to say, and keep going with our class. Here comes Linda. Hi, Rob. Nice to see you.
Deanna.
All right, guys. So I connected again to VDI and they still have the good old message. Let me share my screen today. So for VDI people, the Photoshop and all the Adobe applications, I'm still dealing with all of the tech support people, but the graphics processor still shows up as incompatible. That said, it hasn't stopped most of our application work. But today we're going to keep working with Camera Raw. And in Camera Raw is where we have had some hesitation. So if you guys are on VDI, hi Linda, I know you're on VDI. And Ken, at this point, I think it's you too, because Sola's not here today. If you run into problems with the things that I'm doing, and they're not working for you, let me know and I'll do my best to shirk around and find you a workaround like I tend to do. Okay, so I'm just gonna say okay to that message, and then just there's some new information. So even though we've opened Photoshop before today, there's must have been some update, so just ignore these guys and keep going. So I'm going to stop that share. I just wanted to show you that that message, no matter how many back and forths I've had with tech support, keeps showing up. Now, because of that, I might continue to do my demo with my personal Photoshop, but I will be doing the work on the VDI parallel so that if I run into any problems, I'm going to assume that it is the same problems that Ken and Linda will be focusing on, will be getting. But other than that, I'll count on you guys to tell me. Both of you are really good at writing in the chat or speaking up when you have a problem. So let me know. All right. So, first of all, we're going to head over to the Padlet. thank you guys for posting your work. Oh, here comes Janet. There we go. Let her in. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. And here we are. Getting over to the this morning's Padlet. So, and I don't know, because Esther might not know what we do with Padlet, let me just remind her. We do all our work in Photoshop, but in order to see what people are doing when they have trouble, they share their screen and stuff like that. For people who are not sharing their screen, I still need to see their work. So everyone's doing screenshots and posting it up on Padlet. Plus, if there's any questions of things that they do on their own. And you guys have posted some good stuff that you did on your own this week. So I just wanted to do a little bit of showing of that. But last week when we did Camera Raw and we ran into trouble that we were doing the before and after of this cup, okay? I always tell you to do your screenshots and post it, and I crashed at that moment, remember? So I didn't tell you guys to do a screenshot. So if you can today, when you have a bit of downtime, when I'm helping someone else, please go ahead and open and do the Camera Raw screenshots of the work that we did the other day and post them. And I'm seeing that I have Monica, Mary's, and Souls, but see if you can give me that that screenshot of last week's work. Okay. That said, I was really excited. Mary, I love this photo. I love what you did with it. It's interesting because you know how I'm telling people to run with it. And some of you guys are very new to today's class. And then some of you have taken it a couple of times, and Mary was with me in the summer. And it's so cool to see how you went from, I have no idea what's happening, which is happening to some of you early guys. And then look at you. I love that you use the masking mode that we've been learning to create an original image. You found a heart in a tree in one of those, like, you know, it's really something that hurts the tree when this happens, that they do that. And then she used, what's up? Oh, someone spoke in the background. Okay, so maybe it was just some noise in there. All right, so she used that. So remember the what we've been using, which is the masking, and we've been doing the color adjustment layers. So she used a color fill. She masked out this hole that turned into a heart and added that color into it. But the interesting thing is what you don't see. Okay, and this is this is the reason I'm showing you this, because a lot of you guys have done some masking, but read what she said. I added the tree, had a heart, we did the color mask, that's very visible, we know what she did. But then the second layer was to remove people from the background. Now, can you tell where those people were? Can anyone tell? Okay, just scour it for a little bit. That's what's cool about it, because remember I told you, be careful with the befores and afters, because if you are Mary, you know the before, and you go, oh, there's a blade of grass here that's being replicated and it's really bad. Or maybe this pole has been bent over and you can tell there was a person there. But what truly matters is the after. Those of us who see it and who go, I really looked and I don't see any replicated tidbits, so I can't tell where those people were. So that's a really, so remember that it's your after that matters to others. Even if Mary could say, oh yeah, I can tell that this is jiggling here where I took this person out. It is a good job when others, we, people who are seeing it for the third time, have no idea there were people there in the background before. So well done on applying everything you're learning. Really appreciate you guys doing that. Remember to come in here, you guys, and check out what other people are doing. The work that Thomas did with his poster last week, and Linda, who is again surprising us with some pretty fantastical images. Are these images that you took, or are these from stock photos, Linda?
No, I took all these and I'm sorting through them. This is from Death
Amazing.
Valley.
This is so cool. So listen, you guys, you might always notice that Linda has a different image on her front. And I've told you before, this is her actual art. When you see, you know, right now there's that ball jar, that's her making that art. But actually, when we come into this one, you guys just look at this for a second. I don't know if it translates good, but there's one thing we did last week that might help this image. Who can remember one thing we did in Camera Raw that might help this image tie in a little bit better? I mean, it's supposed to be a fantasy image. We're not trying to make this look realistic, but there's one thing here that doesn't totally match the rest of it. Can anyone think it through? It's okay to be wrong, just throw it out. And there might be more ideas. I'm just thinking of one, but there's many more. Is anyone writing it in the chat?
I mean, it looks amazing, but I would think that some of the sky tones, like the reddish orangey tones, might reflect on the ground.
That's awesome. Now, again, it is supposed to be an image that is, you know, fantasy. We're not supposed to believe it, but within the outside of realistic, you still want to try to believe the image. And I completely agree. You've got these amazing orange colored background mountains and sunsets, and it would really tie this image in if you could reflect some of those colors into the salt flats. I believe that's the salt flats. So the thing is, though, giving color to white is really hard, remember? So actually what Mary did in her photo, that she did a color adjustment layer where she added a color fill. That would be the way to add some color to white. So maybe later when we're in Photoshop doing masking again, Linda, if you want to bring this one up, I can show you a little bit of how you could reflect some little bit of tone, just a tad, like even a tad of yellow adding to it, which might tie it up. I do want to continue with today's class. We're going to be in Camera Raw again, and it's going to be with non-raw images because this is not a raw image. So today I'm going to show you how to use raw filters inside of Photoshop. So that would be the perfect time to apply it to this image. All right. Now, the last thing I did want to say is consider the noise in the sky where there is no noise in the mountains or in the car. So you might want to bring down the noise. And that's something we did last week, remember, with the noise filter and the effects. So maybe if you bring the noise in the sky down, then and a little bit of just some yellow in here, that would really tie it in. I'd love to see if you have a chance to work on it. This is all bonus, you know, you're doing it because you're just putting in all the skills to work. So it's up to you to finish it or not, but I know you, Linda, you're gonna keep working on that stuff. All right. Soul is not here, so I'm going to skip on his design and we're going to jump into, but anyway, check it out. He's also in my Illustrator class and he's always doing amazing stuff, but then he comes and colors it inside of Photoshop. So well done, you guys. I'm going to switch back to VDI now, and I'm going to give it a try in VDI first. And if it's not working, then I'm going to continue in my personal applications. So by now, hopefully you have all this open. I do want to say that I sent you another image this morning. Ken, where are you, Ken? Down there. Remember a couple of weeks ago, Ken, actually, let me head back to pad that again. Ken put up this photo right here where Ken wanted to know if he could work on the shadows of this image, right? And so he wanted to know if he could do, well, you actually had asked about the shadows, but I also said that we could also work on the highlights of this image. So I put it in the Google Drive and in the class, he said, so he emailed it to me and I just put it in the Google Drive. So those of you who are on VDI have it automatically. The rest of you, I emailed it to you. We're not going to use it at the beginning of the class, so you'll have time during break, or if some of you have a hard time getting it, we'll just add it next week into the rotation. But I just wanted to show you that because, Ken, that's a really great photo to work with in Camera Raw. So if after break, I'm going to get you guys to tell me how if everyone has accessed that image, and if you have, then we'll open that one to see if we can work on it on Ken's image. But for now, we're going to keep going with the images that we have. So how many of you did the check-in on your equipment? Did you decide that you're able to Camera Raw images? So to get a gander on anyone, those of you who found out they can shoot Camera Raw images, this was part of the homework from last week, give me a yes. And those of you who don't know or cannot shoot Camera Raw, then give me a no. And if anyone has any question of, how it worked and were they able to find that out, then raise your hand. So the question was, can you shoot camera raw images that then you can operate directly from a bridge like we did last week? Okay, we're getting a couple yes, a couple no's. Rob, did you look into that? If you don't know or didn't look into it, give me a no.
Well,
Alan, Monica, remember go down to the reactions and give me a yes or a no. Thomas, I believe, yeah, there you go. That's a no. All right, now remember that if you have a relatively new phone, and I'm saying relatively newish, 3 years old to now, and it's a very generalized thing, but you should be able to take camera raw images straight from the photo app. And then with older ones, you can put in certain apps to make it there. Alan, you were raising your hand. Is that a question?
No, I'm not sure whether my answer is yes or no.
Well, then it's no, unless you have a question for me to tell you how to find it out. Like if you don't know, or if you know that you can, then that's a no. But if you have a question as to how to figure it out, okay, Sabrina's saying can only do formats, high efficiency and most compatible. What do you mean by most compatible? Oh, your camera. Can you explain a little bit more what you mean about the most compatible? Is that a message you get from your phone?
Yeah, I Googled it and I have an iPhone. And so it said to go in settings to camera formats, but then those were the only 2 options. So I wasn't sure.
So what level, what phone is it? Do you know the model?
It's a 12.
It's a 12. A 12 can do raw. A 12 can
Okay.
do raw. So what I'm going to do, I have the school, since now I'm teaching HyFlex, my school phone is in my briefcase by the door. So after break, grab your phone, bring it back, and then I can share my phone with you. And then I'll show you how to turn the camera on the iPhone. Okay, so anyone who has an iPhone, I don't have an Android available. I usually borrow it from my son I don't have it right now because he's in school. So, but I can ask him to leave his phone next Friday for those of you when I figure out on an Android how to get to camera. All right, so give that a yes then, Sabrina, because you're a yes if you have an iPhone 12. All right, and then Rob or Megan, you guys, did you look into it? If you didn't look into it or you don't know, a no is fine. And then I can help you, kind of what we did with Sabrina. Tell me what your equipment is and I can show you how to find out if your equipment can do camera raw. But at this point, it doesn't matter. What I'm going to teach you today is that it doesn't matter to the post-processing world as to whether you can use the camera raw engine or not. Remember, let me see how well let's see if what I told you last week works. When you shoot the photo, what's the difference between shooting in camera raw or in JPEG? Why would it matter to do one or the other? What's the good and the bad? I'm going to clear you guys' answers now. Any memory why I'm prompting you to see if you can do camera raw?
So JPEG is already compressed, or it compresses the image. RAW has more, I guess, better quality.
Great. That's perfect. There's a bit more that can be said, and I saw some other people open their mouths. Does anyone else want to add something to that? Okay. Hello. Janet, by the way, I'm not, who's showing up as Janet? Is that someone's second computer here?
yeah, that's my second computer.
Thank you, Rob. I was looking
Rob.
at the roster going, there we go. So let me just put your name on there. Rob's second. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I put 23rd. I'm second. Okay, great. So on that one, if you want, you can turn your video off so that it doesn't use so much of your, Wi-Fi capability. If you can click in on the little video icon and just turn the color. You don't have to, but you can. All right.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I have the Zoom on this computer and I have the work on the other computer.
Yeah. Mhm.
So I need to have the Zoom going and the other computer, correct?
Yeah, that's because when you want to share your screen with me, you have
Yes.
your work going on the one that you share. But
Right.
all I'm saying is you don't need to have the video feature on. We're seeing some kind of hazy brown stuff. And it's okay if you have it on, if you're not having issues with, because I know this is your second time getting your second camera up. But it might be affecting you in the matter of speed or Zoom and stuff like that, in which case you can go to the buttons that you have at the bottom left, right next to the recorder, you have the video off, and just click on it, and then you can kind of mute the video. And it's okay if you don't, but it's fine. And today that seems to be, most of you guys aren't on your second computers today. Bonnie isn't here. She's on her second computer. Okay. All right. So back to Raw. Back to Bridge, I mean. Let's open Bridge. And the main thing about Raw, as Mary said, is that when you shoot with the camera, the photo that regularly comes out of the JPEG is already being compressed. That's something the camera does to save the image smaller. So how, at the cost of quality, at the cost of having compressed luminance tones in that image, right? So the issue is that if you shoot the same moment, a JPEG and a RAW, you get kind of not so good looking RAW and a pretty good looking JPEG. But if you then process these images, if you have a chance to post-process them, you're going to have the chance to really work better with the raw pixels because they have not been compressed. That image is much bigger. It occupies much more space in your computer and in your camera. So those are the negatives of it. But you have all of those tones available for you to work. And once you post-process it, you end up with a much more flexible image that you can do much more work with it and end up thus with a much better image after post-processing. So remember, birthday parties, fun stuff, just kind of vacation stuff, you just want to go with JPEG. But when you're really shooting with stuff that you want to then post-process, it takes much more work. That's when RAW is the way to go. So last week we opened RAW, we opened a couple of images, and I showed you 4 images here that are actually RAW and that have different extension numbers. And if you remember, this image was, processed by us last week. So today we're only seeing the after. Okay, image was noisy and it was yellow. We had some highlight issues and stuff. But now we're only seeing the bright white porcelain without noise on it. And it's because it's been processed. And this feature right there, let me actually get the little spotlight. There we go. This little icon that appears right here, that's the one that's telling me that this one's already been processed in Camera Raw. So that's fine. We're going to let that lie for now. But what we're going to say is, well, what if I don't have raw images? A lot of you guys do not have raw images, but you saw how cool the tools were to use. So how do I now actually operate with a JPEG in Camera Raw? And the majority of these photos that I have here are JPEGs. Can we do that and still use the Camera Raw image? So there's 2 tricks I'm going to teach you today. I'm going to teach you how to open a JPEG in the Camera Raw filter to do exactly what we did last week. And then we're going to go ahead and open something in Photoshop. And then from Photoshop, we're going to open up and use the Camera Raw as a filter. So there's 2 other accesses of Camera Raw beyond that, which is basically owning a Camera Raw image, which at this point, some of you guys can and some of you can't, but everyone can use the processing. So we're going to first go to an image that is completely JPEG, and that there's, never even been in Camera Raw. By the way, here's Ken's image that I had said, if you guys have it, BDI, you have it there already. So we're going to go ahead and head over to this, here we go, the content aware fill. We're also going to do some fun content aware stuff on this one once we're in Photoshop. But this is a JPEG, see, content aware fill JPEG. Before we open it up, what is it that we always have to check on the metadata? I give it away. It's like, what color is the white horse? There's a joke. You guys know I'm from Argentina, and I always make these jokes. But in Argentina, we have a joke. Everyone knows San Martin. It's this savior who, independent. Anyway, there's this joke at what color was San Martin's white horse. And the way you say it is Spanish, no one gets it, that you're saying it in the image. So I just told you guys, what are we going to look in this image? And I kind of said, we're going to check out the metadata. So anyway, I gave that one away. So here's the metadata. We see that it's a pretty big image, right? It's 3,000 by 4,000 pixels. Now, looking at this information alone with no other changes, if we just try to print this image, are we going to get a 42 by 56 inch print that looks awesome?
Yeah,
Right. And why not?
because the pixels per inch is 72 dp or 72.
Awesome. This is the number that matters, 72 PPI. 72 PPI means that if nothing else, if I open this image, it looks like it'll be 42 by 56, but that is completely going to be a very blurry, horrible image. So what we need to do is we need to open this image and work inside of Photoshop to change our resolution to 300 PPI, and then we'll end up with a much smaller image. So most of you guys by now, you've all read the handout. We began to work on this. This is kind of something we're going to tackle next week. So if anyone has any questions about resolution and transforming images, we're going to be focusing on doing this whole conversion next week. All right, so here you have a JPEG. I want to open it in Camera Raw. If I double click on this image, it's going to open. Where's it going to open if I double click this image?
Photoshop.
Photoshop. That means we're bypassing Bridge. Camera Raw is in between Bridge and Photoshop, right? So plan B, we can do a right click on it instead of double clicking on it. And then we head down to open in Camera Raw. So this is you're forcing a JPEG to use Camera Raw. Whereas had you double clicked on a Camera Raw image, it would open in Camera Raw. But a JPEG has to be told, hey, hey, come back here. I need you to open in this that you would normally not do. So right click open in Camera Raw. Remember, if you have a touchpad, right click is 2 fingers down. And here we go, open in Camera Raw. So instead of opening in Photoshop, we are forcing this image to open in Camera Raw. Now Camera Raw today seems to be working, and at least right now I'm still in VDI and this seems to be working. So hopefully we will not find its limits. And let me know if anyone's having an issue with the image, that it didn't open, especially you VDI people. Give me a message or give me a no. But I think since I opened it, Ken and Linda, you guys okay?
Yes.
All right, yes and yes. Okay, good. All right. So first of all, last week when we did the automatic Camera Raw, it didn't work too well. Remember, it was like, it just kind of messed up the colors of our coffee. But I've always told you to first check on those automatic buttons to just see what it is that the computer thinks it might work best for this image. And if it does a good job of recognizing it, it might work. So remember, we would go from the top to bottom and we just kind of start with the basic here. Oh, there comes Barbara. Let me let Barbara in. Okay, so hey Barb, we just went into Bridge and opened up this image. Let me actually, because I haven't shown you how to open it, give me a second while I catch Barbara up. I'm going to cancel. In Bridge, you need to go and find this image that's at the top, content to or fill, and then open it in RAW by right clicking and saying open with camera. Oh God, this happened to me before. When I did this back and forth, that the image didn't. I hope it works. Okay, so then just say open in Camera Raw. Okay, because if you double click on it, it's just going to go into Photoshop. All right.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Just in time, I was able to catch you up because we were just starting on it. All right, so here's the good old automatic that I told you. If you do nothing else, just hit a little auto to start with to see what the computer thinks it needs to do. And there we go. What do you think? Impressive or not? I'm going to click it again to turn it off. Click it on again.
Not much.
Well, it's not like you have, see, this is the kind of image the computer, Photoshop doesn't have much to work on. This could be anything. I mean, it could be a grain of sand. It could be, there's not much there for, the computer's artificial intelligence or machine learning to figure out what we're looking at here so that it can actually give us a better automatic adjustment. So remember, a lot of people are like, oh, I do everything with auto, except for that, computer doesn't really understand what it's working with sometimes. And this is one of those, what are we seeing here? So we're going to go ahead and open the basic. And in the basic here, we have the original tools. Now, we're not going to completely process this image the way we did with the coffee cup. We're just going to spend a little bit of time on some of these point tools here, because my main job today is to show you how to open Camera Raw, how to open a JPEG in Camera Raw directly, which is what we're doing here. And then more interestingly, I want to tell you guys how inside of Photoshop we're going to access Camera Raw. So if we go through all of the processing that we did last week, the main difference, and this is probably, other than the origination of the image, we're already, because this is shot as a JPEG image, already we've clipped the highlights, right? So we know that over here, we have probably no detail. Remember, white without detail ends up being printed as white photo paper. So that's what I mean. When there's no detail, there's no ink whatsoever on, that is right without detail. We need to make sure that we have white with detail and black with detail before we go into pure black. So that's the range that we're looking at. And so when we go over here, what we see is that we have a pretty interesting sky where there's a ton of color over here and nothing. And so I was actually present because I took this picture. What's happening is we had a fog bank coming in. So if you know the story, and if you look at the color of over this, is you understand that that's what's happening. But otherwise, that's a really weird sky, right? I mean, like half white, half blue. It's not, So we had this fog. It was back there, and this is this one little hole opened up for a test to have a little bit of light in there. So, so again, one of those images that's not what Photoshop can figure out what's happening. The biggest difference is that with JPEG and RAW. Last week when we went to white balance in Camera Raw, we got a whole list of presets, right? Daylight, shade, tungsten lighting, fluorescent lighting, that we were able to test to see if we could get the camera to the computer to adjust the lighting for us. But that is part of the metadata that a raw image has that the camera has already eliminated in a JPEG. The camera has just already post-processed this image and has destroyed that information. So white balance is the one place where you can see that you're working with a JPEG instead of with a raw image, because here we only have the choice of as shot, which is what the camera registered, or auto. And when you hit auto, I kind of like what this one's doing better. I'm going to go between as shot and auto. Now,
it warmed it up.
It did. So thanks, Barbara. Notice, if you want to see what's happening over here, that what changes is the temperature and tint. We talked about that. So I'm going to head back to as shot, and we've got this image that the camera figured out the way to shoot it correctly is to put it in these settings. And then Photoshop, or in this case, Camera Raw, is going, well, let me give it a try. And both of the sliders moved over to the right. That means it had too much blue. So by adding yellow, it warmed it up, and it was actually kind of green, and it gave it some magenta. Now, again, this is a guess that the computer takes. And then after that, you go, well, I like it, I don't like it. Let me adjust it myself. So if you know that this photo was taken at sunset, you might go, yeah, but maybe I need it to be a bit more, a bit warmer. So you can increase the yellow on that one. You can increase the magenta, because sunset has a bit of magenta on it. So you can look at that and see that's what I want to do. But remember that a lot of the times you weren't there. I mean, you weren't there for this photo. I was there, but you weren't there. So you have no idea if it's sunset or it's sunrise or if it's midday. So one thing I just want to always impress upon you, the question that I get a lot is, well, what's correct? What's color correct? And I can, there's entire courses of what's color correct and color calibration. We've been talking about that before. But in the end, post-processing is just an art. It's just your subjective choice. What story do you want to tell with this image, right? And so do you want to say that it was the morning, or that it was the nighttime, or it's a dark and scary Halloween image, or is it a, hey, happy day at the beach? And you are going to manipulate emotions by the tones that you add to this photo, okay? So it's your choice if you want to say that it was more one way or another. Now you have to also consider that if this is supposed to be realistic, you can't go completely wild and weird, because then, you know, obviously it's not gonna be a choice. Now, remember
And
what's
it's
happening
done.
up there? What's happening up here is when we're going, it's these clipping warnings that we've got turned on here that we turned on last week. That's warning us that we're getting out of the, so I'm gonna leave those on, but show you that you can do weird things to this image and make it completely bizarre. And if you were about to put maybe cars on it and men walking into the ocean, you might want to do that, right, Linda? But if you're trying to say this is a day at the beach, then you might want to stick with something that's a bit more realistic. And usually that's what you can get when you hit something like auto. It's Photoshop going, well, this is a regular day. Let's make it a little bit warmer and that kind of stuff. All right. So let's head back to the rest of the stuff that's happening here. Exposure, contrast, highlights. I'm going to let you guys play with this one later because this image in particular I brought in for us to work on these steps. I want us to work with content aware retouching, and we're going to be working with retouching the second part of today. And I'm going to get you guys to eliminate the steps, and then it's not gonna look like anyone was there. So what I want us to do right now is to open this one in Photoshop. So let's assume that we've done all of our raw processing, right? We finished it. The only indicator that this is not raw is that in the white balance, you don't have all the choices that you had before for color. And the second issue here was that this image already does not have as much latitude in order to process it. But beyond that, those are the only indications that this is not geo, so a raw. So in we go into Photoshop, and we briefly did this last week, but we had a camera raw image. So this is a bit of review here again. Which one of these choices between open, cancel, or done would take us into Photoshop? And remember that this is Mac and PC. So on VDI, I'm on a PC and I see open on the left, cancel and done. But that if you're on a Mac, you're going to see it the other way around. Remember that? But the choices are the same. And I wanted to actually, give me a second here while I open this one up in my, I'm going to change my share here for just 1 second. I am now sharing. Hold on, it's not picking it up. I'm trying to share my second screen with you guys, but it's not giving me that second screen to share. Oh, Bonnie made it. Bonnie is joining us. She must have settled in someplace on her trip. Okay, I wanted to share with you guys the window. For some reason, it's not picking it up. I'm trying to share you guys the Mac window. Give me 1 sec. Photoshop, it's not doing that. Okay, so here is content aware fill. This is the Mac now. Okay, I'm in my personal computer on my Mac. Is this sharing with you guys? Is my camera raw window sharing? Okay, good. Because when it comes up and as a pop-up, sometimes it doesn't. All right, so notice that down here at the very bottom, we have the cancel, done, and open, and they're in different positions and orders. And I just wanted to show you that because that's the few differences between Photoshop and Mac tend to be in the shortcuts and in this case where the things are located. So that's the only reason I was trying to do that, but I'm going to continue because as long as VDI holds up, I'm going to continue in VDI. It's my lowest common denominator, so to say. If it works here, it'll work for the rest of you guys. And so now, if I say cancel, what's going to happen to the changes I made?
They're undone.
Yeah, so that's good, Monica. So Mary, what did you say?
They will be undone.
It'll be undone. All the work, and we didn't put any work into this one, but you know, last week we spent quite a bit of time on our image. So all the work we did, boom, gone. We don't want that. Hi, Bonnie. Thank you for joining us from wherever it is that you are right now. We're just working on getting this image in Camera Raw. And since it's a JPEG, you have to right click and say open in Camera Raw to force it into Camera Raw. Okay. I think you know how to handle that one. I know. Okay. So then if I say done, on the other hand, what's going to happen? Where's this image going to go?
I thought it saved it, right? So it just goes back to bridge, but it saves the changes.
Yeah, Monica, you're perfect. And Monica, you were saying something? Your sound is off, sorry. I know, that's why Mary's speaking. Your mouth moves. Any one of your screens can be unmuted. it's
I
fine.
wanted to say the same thing as Mary did.
All right, so last time that's just what we did. We said done and it went back into bridge with the corrections, right? So what we didn't do is head over to the open. Now open means open in Photoshop. And if you want to open it in Photoshop to make things more complicated, you could open it in different modes. Now I haven't taught you about these modes yet, but test it out. Click on that little arrow. Let me get my my arrow here. And then when you click on this arrow, it tells you basically open, which is the same as open. Open is object, and that smart object is something that we're going to talk about in like 5 minutes. But we're not going to open as object. We'll see it in about 5 minutes. And then open as copy. So if perchance you wanted actually to not have the original image disappear, and you want this one to be just a copy of it, you'll end up with a duplicate. Then you open as copy. Then this one goes back into bridge with the change that we did. So it's equivalent to having said done. And then another copy opens up in Photoshop for us to keep working with it in Photoshop. So then you keep both of the states of this image. All right. Now, for the most part, you will probably usually end up opening as object. But since I haven't shown you what that is, and I'm going to teach that to you in a few minutes, we're going to ignore that. And we're first going to just say open. So instead of saying open there, we can just as well just click on this little word open right here. And it's the same as opening. So either open there or with your arrow, click on that and choose just open. And let's do that now. And now this is kicking Photoshop open up. There it is. Photoshop's opening up. And then the image will appear once it's managed to process it. There it is. It opened in Photoshop. So the photo went back into bridge and then it kicked open into Photoshop with our change done. Now I know since we made so few changes in this one, it's hard to tell, but if this were the coffee that we did last week where we made a lot of changes, now we would have the white coffee cup without noise right here. And in this case, we just have a slightly warmer image in Photoshop. And this is really important. This is the beginning stage of this image now. If I want to make this bluer again, or not, I can then modify these pixels to make them bluer, or I have to go back to bridge to reopen, undo that warming, and then open that one in Photoshop. Otherwise, I'm not working with the original pixels. And remember that the goal of all of our processing is to be non-destructive. Okay, so everything I'm teaching you is the non-destructive modifications. We never want to mess with the original pixels of an image. Okay, yeah, sure. You said that 25,000 times, Deanna, but aren't these pixels modified? Yeah, I'm seeing Bonnie. I have now opened an image in Photoshop where the pixels have been destructively modified. Yes, I can go back to bridge, and yes, in bridge, let me show you bridge. I can go back here and see how now I have those tools, that little icon there that I showed you in there. That's showing me that the image has been processed in Camera Raw, which by the way, means that the next time I can double click on this and it'll open in Camera Raw, even though it's a JPEG, because it already has all of the modifications in Camera Raw. So if you have a JPEG that's already been processed in Camera Raw that has those little icons there, that means that now you can just double click on it. But this is what's holding the original image, the original pixels, the non-destructive modification. Head back to Photoshop. This image has been destructively modified. What we're seeing here right now is already not the beginning. So if you made a mistake, you got it too warm, too dark, too light, too whatever, you have to go back to the original and start all over the process again, or be happy that you are going to just work with this one as good as it is. So at the beginning, when you're first learning how to do raw, when you're first learning how to do all of this post-processing, you will invariably be doing things to this image that might not have been such a good idea because you're learning. And then you kind of can't go back. What if you now want to change this sky? We're going to be changing the sky. We're going to put in some dramatic clouds on it. So great. But what if what the processing you did in raw had affected it in such a way that now you can't, you know, easily mask the sky out? Well, you're stuck with having to start from the very beginning, and that can be hours of work. So what's my workaround? Let's go back to Bridge. We're going to leave that one open in Photoshop. Let's go back to Bridge. And now we're going to figure out a plan B. Remember I told you I'm going to show you 2 ways to work with Camera Raw with JPEGs. So that was plan A. You right click, you open in Camera Raw, you process it in Camera Raw, and then you open it in Photoshop with no chance to go back to modify your changes. Slightly riskier. And if you're good at your Camera Raw processing and you knew exactly what you were going to do and you just did a couple of things on it and moved in, fine. But if you're in that in-between space that you're not sure, then how do we do this a different way? So let's go and find a different JPEG image. So we're going to have both open later when we're done. And we're going to actually work with Camera Raw. What's up? Did you say something, Barb, or was it just, and it looks like you weren't trying to say something. You're not moving your mouth. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and head into Bridge again, and then our third image in. Remember, if yours is not showing up in alphabetical order, then go to the B brush max exposure. And this is a JPEG. So this one we're just going to open in Photoshop. So to open in Photoshop, we're just going to double click. But as usual, I'm going to send you guys over to the metadata so you have an idea of what's happening with this image. So you guys, if this image has to combine with the image we opened before, and I'm not going to point to the things this time, I'm going to let you guys answer without me pointing to it. We checked out the metadata of the first photo, and we're checking the metadata out of this one. You might not remember, in which case you need to go check. How will these 2 photos interact with each other resolution and size-wise? What do you think? What should you do right now? What should you do in order to answer this question? You can't just guess at it. You have to do something. Anyone? Sabrina, your mouth opened, or were you just going, I have no idea?
Well, I think you
You
just
don't
look
have-
at the
you don't have to do
metadata.
it. Yes.
You know, we
right?
see that the PPI is really low, so we know we need to increase that resolution.
The PPI is really low, but in this case doesn't matter so much. The first thing you said, look at the metadata. What matters? What truly matters between this image and the one that we compared before? So you were right. We look at the metadata. What number matters for me to see the size of these 2 images? It's not the PPI.
Dimensions.
The
The dimension.
dimensions in what? Because there's dimensions and there's dimension in inches. Which one matters here?
In pixels.
Yeah, the dimensions in pixels, which is this one, the one that does not have the word in inches, right? So here we have 3000 by 40. And then here's, you see it here in the summary of the metadata, 3000 pixels by 4000 pixels. So now the step is, if you don't remember, it was pretty high. So you click on it again and you go, oh, look at that, 3000 by 4000. Wow. How well are these going to interact if you need to combine them up there as a composite? They're going to fit perfectly into each other, right? So remember that was in comparison to, for example, this image that only has 1000 pixels by 2000 pixels, where when you open these 2, you're going to have a tiny little woman here in this big image, or a tiny little woman here that'll look like a little, you know, bug crawling up to that rock. All right, because of that initial total amount of pixel that image already has. And that at this point, we're not talking quality print or anything. We're just talking about total pixels in the image. Right. So we're going to open this one up. It's a JPEG. We want to open it straight from Photoshop. So simple double click on it. It's going to open up. Clicks open Photoshop. And here's this image. We're going to work on masking this one later. But the first thing we want to do is say, okay, do I do this with the adjustment layer masks that we've been learning, right? So say maybe I want to make this into a silhouette. Maybe I want to grab this whole dark area and just make it black. Maybe that's one of the things I want to do. Or maybe it's the other way around. It's kind of like, I really would like to see that I'm inside of a cave. And I would like to actually, I can see on this side that this is a cave wall, but this is getting kind of dark in there. And by the way, remember the histogram? It's really going high up on the left side. So this means that this is dark without detail. So we're going to the opposite extreme of white without detail. We've got too much black here. So we're going to want to bring this up a little bit so that we can see that we're in a cave that has a little bit of access to light, right? So whichever of the two, maybe it's the other way around. You want to enhance, which is in fact what I want to do. I want to enhance the colors or what's out there because, you know, because of the way this photo was taken, the sky looks great, but the rocks are a little bit washed out. The ocean's a bit washed out. So I want to work on enhancing those details. So I'm going to have to work separately with lights and darks. Up until now, you've learned how to do that with adjustment layers. Today, I'm going to show you how to do that with Camera Raw from inside of Photoshop. So we haven't opened Camera Raw yet. This is a JPEG. Can we work with the Camera Raw tools as opposed to the multiple adjustment layers? Now, multiple adjustment layers would do it. We've done a lot of that processing with masking. Let's try Camera Raw in here. First of all, the reason I'm comparing this one to this one is because here I got stopped and said, wait, we already have modified our pixels destructively. So how can we do that differently here? I could have done that, process it in Camera Raw and come in here, but now I want to have access to those unmodified pixels in case I change my mind and I want one time to have this be a silhouette and one time to have this be a bright, you know, rocky cave. I want those pixels not to be eternally turned into something dark. So by processing it here, we can remain in the non-destructive mode. First, though, we need to protect this image. Remember I said that in Camera Raw, you could open as object? What that meant, I'm gonna, yeah, do you mind muting yourself? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. So what we're gonna first do is protect this image by turning it into a smart object. So that's what the word open as object meant. It was talking about smart objects. Now, this is the first time I'm introducing smart objects to you. And the way I like smart object to be, to describe it, and just kind of shows you my geek background and all my kids' eons of, you know, science fiction type of books and movies. You guys are going to put like a force field around this image. Okay, we're going to protect it. Nothing is going to be able to hit this image. What we're going to do is kind of envelop it in a perfect little like bubble. I think when I was a kid, how I want to just make my little kids have a bubble around them, have nothing happen to them, right? That's what we're going to do with this image. We're going to completely protect it so that very few things can affect it. That's what converting an image to a smart object is. Now, there's a lot more depth to smart objects that we're going to keep going in the future. But right now, we have two ways of converting an image to a smart object. And I'm going to show you the first one. Don't do the first one. And then we're going to do the second one. But just so I know that there's two ways. I can head over here to layer. And I can just go smart object, convert to smart object. Don't do this one. Just notice that if I don't plan to go on to use Camera Raw, this is a good way to turn things into smart objects. Okay. Now, there's a caveat. I'm telling you that we're going to use Camera Raw. So instead of doing it from here, it would work, but there's a different way to do it. Camera Raw is a filter. Again, something new for you guys. We haven't used filters in Photoshop yet. So when you go to the filter menu, at the very top, before you even, these are all different filters. Now, before I even talk about filters and what to do with filters, let me say that filters are completely destructive. They are like the headache of anyone who's trying to be non-destructive modifier of images, because any filter you apply completely destroys, changes images. Now, you can do fantastical stuff. You can turn this into a Renaissance painting. You can turn this into a mosaic. You can do, you know, pop art. With filters, you can do, you know, whatever stretch of the imagination you want. But you can also do some really useful things like, see, there it is, Camera Raw filter. When it's inside of Photoshop, it shows up as a filter. And you know what Camera Raw does from what we did last week. You can liquefy that. Liquefy, by the way, this is the best friend of anyone, all the cover models who want to look slim and long-legged and stuff like that. You go to liquefy. There's a couple of fun stuff here. Camera raw filter is what we need to use. If I use camera raw filter, again, this point is just demo only. So give me 1 minute, because I know when I have you guys do it, then it takes forever. And I just want to show you really quickly. I'm going to open camera raw filter. See, it opened camera raw, didn't it? I'm going to turn these off so that you don't see that white stuff for a second. It happened in camera raw. And I'm going to do one real crazy thing to this, whatever. I'm just going to go there, highlights and blacks and shadows. So I'm just doing something completely weird to this image. And I'm going to say, okay, doesn't matter what I did. There it is. That's the camera raw filter applied to my image without a smart object. What happened to my pixels? I can't hear you, Sabrina, but I see your mouth answering. So,
I'm guessing they're destroyed.
yeah, they've
Distracted.
been totally shot. I have like, this is like the worst thing I could ever do to an image. And of course I exaggerated what I did to it, but the problem is that if you do a small adjustment,
I like the
you
image.
but if you do a small adjustment, you don't know that you've just done a destructive modification. Here it's like clear. Okay, I really messed this image up. If I want this to look like the interior cave walls, it's great. If I want some far-fetched, silhouette with intense bright, not bright actually, but intensely saturated dark colors. I didn't say it's good or bad. It's just destructive. If I now try to go back to see those cave walls, they're gone. Completely unretrievable, except for if you guys know the solution of the history. I could go back and undo my history, but that's not the point. If I close this image, they're destroyed forever and ever. So I'm going to do a Command Z or Control Z, remember, when we undo the last procedure. So now instead, so that's it. That's why you don't want to do it that way. So filter, convert for smart filters first, which guys, smart filter is just smart object. It's the exact same thing, but since it's in the filter menu, it's called convert for smart filters. So before you touch any of these filters, you first convert for smart filters. And that's why instead of having you go all the way to layer, go to smart object or whatever, it conveniently have a menu item here that says convert for smart filters. That is what we're going to do before we tackle anything else in here. So let's click on convert for smart filters under the filter menu. It's in the same place for Mac or PC, but then you get a warning. It's going to say, hey, you know what? In order to start smart filters, we're going to turn it into a smart object. I'm like, why don't you just call it convert to smart object? I don't get it, but it's warning you that it's going to turn into a smart object, right? So yay, let's say, okay. All right. So we have done that. Has anything changed? Do you see a force field shimmering around the image? Well, you should, in your imagination, see that force filter. The only thing you see, though, that actually tells you that this has been changed is that little icon right there showing in your layer. Okay, so this is I'm going to undo the thing I just did. This is before smart filter. There was nothing there. All right. Once you convert this into a smart filter and you say okay to that little message, that little box there, that's telling me that this now is protected. Now, we're going to be learning retouching and all of that in the future. We're not going to do that today. But for example, if I try to retouch this image, I'm going to get a little, can't do that. See, I can't retouch this image. My tool is like, can't do that. What if I try to paint on it? Can't do that. So it's like, nope, you have no access to me. You cannot modify my pixels. That's what this is saying. Now there's a workaround and I will teach you that. And it has to do with opening the image that's inside of the smart filter now, reaching into that. But right now you have completely protected this image from being modified. I'm gonna head back over here. So anyway, I'm gonna keep on trying tools, and what you're gonna keep seeing is the not gonna happen. So now that it's protected, now we're gonna go back up to filter. And now, yes, we can open the camera raw filter. Okay, so now let's go for that. Click on camera raw filter. And we end up in the same spot as before. Camera raw opens up. Okay, so now let me know with, I'm assuming at this point that this image isn't causing trouble, but my VDI is hesitating. So the moment it's hesitating, I might be putting VDI too much, in which case I'll keep showing it in my personal one. But I basically applied a camera, a smart object to the image, and now I'm doing a camera raw filter. And that's two intense processes. And so I have a feeling that we might be taxing VDI to its limits, but sometimes it's because I'm also holding the Zoom for everyone. Linda, Ken, how you guys doing? My two VDI people. Is it opening up for you guys? Are you still in the middle of figuring it out?
Mine did.
Yours opened up,
Mhm.
so it might just be me. And Ken?
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to tell. Oh yeah, yeah, it took a little while, but I'm fine now.
Okay, so mine isn't opening up. So I'm actually going to stop my share because sometimes sharing is a problem, but it might be that I just ran the gamut of what my VDI can do. But as long as you two have it, remember, this is what happened to my VDI last week. It suddenly just stopped and wouldn't do it anymore. So I'm actually going to log out of my VDI and try to open up again, but I'm going to stop there. My main concern was whether you two guys could continue. But as long as you two guys can continue, then I'm actually going to replicate this in mine. So give me a second here. I'm opening my image in Photoshop, and then I'll share that screen. And this is my Photoshop now. All right, and let me share this screen now. And I'm gonna add the bridge to it. There we go. And then during break, I'm gonna try to connect to VDI again. So now this is my Photoshop and my VDI. Cool. And so now it's opened in here. So now I need to do the same thing to mine. I need to go up to filter, convert for smart filters, and I'll say okay. And then I get my little box that says it's there. And then I'm going to go to filter and camera raw filter, and that's going to open up. Okay. So now my camera raw opened up. All right. So now here we are inside of camera raw. The change that I'm going to make right now is going to be just as ridiculous as the one that I did before. And I want you all guys to do it. I don't care what you do, drag things to some weird place. I'm going to go temperature there, filter over there. I want something very, very, very obvious and messed up. So what I just did is enough. Just throw the temperature to one way, the tit to the other, whatever it is that you do, it doesn't matter. And then we're just going to say okay to that. All right, so how's it going? Here we have, again, I don't care what you do to it, just do something that clearly shows that it's been changed and then say okay. Notice that there's no done, cancel, or open. There's only the okay or cancel. Is everyone there? Give me a yes if you've done that. All right, I'm seeing some yeses, a couple thumbs up. So let's explore the difference between what we did before. Oh, I don't have the other one. I need to go through to have the two examples. I need to, give me a second. I need to do quickly this one. In camera raw, let me do an as shot to auto, and then I'm going to say open. Okay, so now this is the one that we had before, where the changes that we made are stuck in the image. And this one, on the other hand, is an image where I've done the camera raw inside of Photoshop and with a object, a smart object, or with a smart filter applied. And what's happening is that I'm getting a very different look as to when I had my adjustment layers. My adjustment layers always popped up above, remember? We would have a change above with a mask. Our filters appear below. So below my image, I'm getting a white thing. What do you guys think this white thing is? What does it look like? We've seen these white boxes before. What does it look like?
Like a
That's-
mask.
It's a mask. It's a mask ready to be worked on with black or white brushes, right, at different opacities to hide the effect of Camera Raw filter on my image if I want to hide this from this effect. But for now, we're not going to use the mask. We're just going to look at that filter there. So just as before, the adjustment layers were editable. This is editable, but first I just want to see the change I made. So I'm going to use this little eyeball right there. Turn it off. Turn it on. So my image is completely unaffected, meaning my image remains, whereas in this example, the warming up can't be undone. This is an image that's been messed up, so to say. Even if we did a good job with it, it is now definitely modified destructively versus this one is still there. And I can also turn this eyeball off, right? Because sometimes you have different filters here. So you might want to turn them all off at the same time, then you turn this one off. But in this case, we only have one filter, so we can just turn it off from here. It's just that if you have many more, you have to individually turn those off. So this one would turn all of them off. Anyway, we have only one and we hate what we did. Let's assume we hate what we did because I hate what I did to this one. I know, Barb, you liked what I did to the other one, but I draw the limit at this one. I hate what I did to this one. So we want to change it. Well, guess what? Let's double click on Camera Raw filter right there. And it opens up again. And then I can go back by double clicking and double clicking to my starting settings. And there we go. I have complete control over this image as well. It was a JPEG. I opened it inside of Photoshop as a JPEG. And all I had to do was protect it as a filter, as a smart filter. Then I can do Camera Raw. Again, I'm limited that I only have auto as shot. I don't have any other of the possibilities open. But other than that, I've got all the tools that I had before with the additional, so to say, advantage of being able to always go back to the original pixels. Now, in this image, say that what we wanted to do was the first option was that I want to be able to see the rock face of the inside of the cave better. Then what part of the image should I work on, do you think? Lights, darks, middle tones? Any idea? I'll let you guys play around with it. We had exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, right? And so I had told you to maybe hold off on exposure, hold off on contrast, and to focus on these four. So if I'm telling you that I want to work on is to lighten up the inside of the cave, which one of these should I start working with?
I try the highlights.
So I want to lighten the inside of the cave and I'm going to go for the highlights. Okay,
The
let's give that a try.
shadows.
Well,
the
I'm going to try
shadows.
the highlights first. So I'm going to work on highlights.
Ooh, no.
Why?
You
Because
gotta mask it.
most of my
Okay.
highlights. Yeah, we can do some masking, but I haven't taught masking inside of RAW yet, right? So inside of RAW, at this point, by the way, RAW has been around, Camera Raw filter tool has been around maybe 10 years, I don't know. Every time getting better and better and better, but it had one huge limitation. And by the way, this is the same tool that Lightroom uses. This is how you develop photos. It's called Develop Feature in Photoshop, in Lightroom. And it had this big backdraw to it, which is that you couldn't do masking. So you could only work with all the darks or all the lights or all the highlights. For the first time ever in 2022, this version of Lightroom of RAW is the first time when you can actually do masking inside of RAW, which means you could do some masking inside of Lightroom. It's not as good as the masking in Photoshop, but it's certainly good enough for a lot of work. Okay. But I'm not talking about masking yet. I was talking more about the tones that we have in here. So yeah, I think someone else, I believe Mary, someone mentioned the shadows. So we have the shadows and the blacks is what I'm gonna attack right now. So I'm going to go over to the shadows first. And if I move them to the left, my shadows get darker. If I move them to the right, my shadows get lighter. And now I can see that I'm standing inside of a cave. And I can see all the details of the shadow. Now notice though, that the shadows, if you really approach, that's if you were to go to 100%, this is where you get, so I'm going to click on 100%. This is where you get a lot of that noise. Okay. And look at how sharp the sky looks. No noise on the sky, no noise anywhere. And yet when you go into the shadows here that have been lightened, see how noisy they get? Remember we talked about last week about how noisy the noise tends to show up in the shadows. So see all those little dots that you see everywhere? That's the noise that's in the shadows. Anyway, but that's because I threw the shadow way over to the very end. I'm going to double click on that. And at 100%, remember I went down here for the 100%. At 100%, what I see is that there's some clicking in my black. But maybe I might want to lighten the black a little bit first before I throw the shadows all the way to the top. Since we're talking about colors for the entire image or tones for the entire image, I don't need to stay in this 100% mode because I'm not yet looking at sharpen. I just went 100% just to show you the noise. I'm going to go fit in screen again so that I can see the entire thing. And then, yes, I'm going to grab my blacks and see what happens if I move my blacks over. So if I lighten my blacks completely, see how a lot of the stuff doesn't get affected. It all gets a bit lighter, but it doesn't get affected. Why? Because believe it or not, however dark this image is, the blacks really are the darkest part of the spectrum. So I move all my blacks over to the right and all I'm getting is some lightening of the lightest part of the blacks. So it doesn't seem to make as much difference as the shadows, right? Which makes a huge difference because most of this image sits in the dark shadows versus the blacks. So ideally, you would first try to treat the blacks a little bit with the blacks, with the black slider. And then once the blacks open up a tad so that the real dark parts get lighter, then you can do less of the shadow work. You don't have to go all the way to the end to make the shadows work. Now, that said, I'm going to be doing a little bit of both, a little bit of each, black and shadow. And now clearly you can see the side walls. Now, what Bonnie said is true. If you want to equalize these two sides, you would have to mask one of these sides off, right? Because right now, well, this is lightening up that I didn't see before. This one is also lightening up as well. Now, it makes sense. The sun is coming in from the right. It would make sense that one side would be lighter than another. But if our intention was for both sides to be the same, I would now have to create a mask where I say, no, stop, you're fine. You don't need to keep lightening up. And then I could lighten this one up a little bit more. And then they'd be even. But that kind of mask is not the kind of masking you can do yet comfortably inside of RAW. You want to do that inside of Photoshop to have more control over it. All right, so how about we do the opposite? Double click, bring the shadows back to the middle. What if I want to turn this into a silhouette? If I work on shadows for silhouette, it's going to be hard because again, I'm not getting a complete clean all of the images. So for a silhouette, the blacks is awesome, right? Click on blacks all the way to the end, and then I go move the shadows. And to the best of its ability, the image has darkened to the point of complete, like, again, if you print this, this is just flat black, which is what a silhouette is. So we'd want it to be completely black. But then I'm left with some of this stuff, which it wasn't so wrong at the beginning when Bonnie said highlights, because these were the highlights of that part of the cave. So if I move all the blacks and the shadows over, how do I tackle what's left? Well, these were highlights or whites. It just happened to be inside of the cave. So I'm going to now go and target the highlights and bring that down. And then what happens? I'm just trying to bring these down. Okay. If I tackle my highlights, all my highlights get affected. If instead I want to tackle my whites, all my whites get affected, right? I'm going to undo that. So this is the limitation of Camera Raw without masking. So you say, I do my best, but this cannot be affected. Now, I'm not saying right now where this is what we actually wanted to do or not with the image. Maybe you guys preferred the other option, maybe you prefer this option, but what I want to show you is how to combine now adjustment layers that we did before with Camera Raw. So for either circumstance, if we want to darken or lighten only a portion of this, we need to combine this and then add an adjustment layer to complete this thing. By the way, I did want to say one thing that has happened is that down here in the insides, before we did, I'm going to double click on shadows again, double click on blacks. Remember I told you that what I thought about this image is that it needed this whole part in here was kind of washed out, that it needed to be worked on. So here I've been trying to work only on the cave walls, but by default, and I'm just going to throw these back in there. What happened to that stuff in there? That washed out feeling that I had is gone, right? So that stuff has been affected as well. It's just that there was lots of material here that didn't get as affected because they're highlights, right? But the ones that were shadows got intensified. They got more saturated. They got darkened. And suddenly my insides look really good. Again, let me double click and double click. And let's see which one affected it most. Was it the blacks? Let's go backwards, or was it the shadows? Which one do you think it was?
Blacks.
It's the blacks, right? So again, when you're, and the reason I'm doing this is we can make this image be anything we want. As I said, we make it one way or the other, but I'm trying to get you guys to like observe what each of these sliders does. And when suddenly you go, oh, well, the landscape part looks really cool right now. Well, but it's shadows and blacks. And out here, I didn't think I had many blacks or shadows, right? So which one affected it? Well, back it up and just play with it yourself. If I do this only to the shadows, I'm getting some darkening of these shadows, which is interesting, but that doesn't seem to make such a big difference. But when I move the blacks, well, look at that. There must have been quite a bit of those tones in this water, in this area here, because the whole thing got affected by moving the blacks over. So it's just learning that not because it seems to make sense, just because it's called blacks doesn't mean that there's none of those dark tones in there. It certainly worked. Anyway, let's choose one or the other by a vote. I'm going to let you guys vote. Are we going to try to lighten our cave walls so that it looks like we can see that we're inside of a cave, or are we going to try to darken our cave walls and have it look it more like a silhouette? Which way are we going to go? Give me a yes if you want to make it look like you're in, you can see the inside of the cave. So you want to lighten the cave walls. Give me a no if what you want to do is turn it into a silhouette and have us only see the landscape well. So that's the second choice. The landscape and the dark caves is no, and the light cave walls is yes. All right, so at this point, I'm seeing mainly yeses and a couple of undecideds. I know, no, that's your second computer. You are decided. And Alan, you don't have a preference. Well, even if you have a preferences, you're outvoted because now there's so many yeses. Bonnie?
I want both.
You
I want to lighten, see a tiny bit of detail, unless I'm on an iPad and not at home. So, but I'd like to see a little more detail, tiny bit more on the left,
Okay.
and then really focus on the sea and the rocks and the sky.
All right. So basically, though, you're still talking about lightening the inside a little bit. So
Just
you're
a little bit.
So you're kind of on the yes side of it, because yes,
Right.
we all want to fix the background. That'll happen on both. The background we want to look better no matter what. Okay. So now let's combine then all of our, sorry, Barb, you were outvoted. You can do that on your own. I'm gonna clear your feedback. We're gonna go with lightening the inside of the cave, maybe not to the extent of, whoa, how I showed it before, where we make it much lighter, because yeah, that did destroy the quality a little bit there. But then we also want to have a nicer landscape. Let's call that part of the landscape. So then we're going to have to combine our raw with our adjustment layers to accomplish both of these. So the first thing I'm going to do is, yes, go back in here and lighten my shadows. So I've actually lightened both shadows and black. So I'm going to first pick up the blacks a little bit, and then I'm going to go to the shadows, maybe a bit less on the blacks and more on the shadows. I'm going to see which ones. Okay, so now I do want to approach 100% because I want to see the effect on my my noise. So I'm going to click 100% and drag myself over there because I do want to see what's happening here when I do that. At what point is it better to move more blacks to the right? Again, so it's like an experiment. You move the blacks all the way to the right, then you move some shadows, and then I look at it, and then I'll go, okay, let me just drop that back, and maybe I'll move my shadows all the way to the right, and then I'll move my blacks only a little bit. No, that actually looks worse. So I'm going to first work on blacks, I think. Plus, if I worked on blacks, remember that helped the outside. So don't forget that if I move the blacks all the way to the left, we were darkening the outside. But if I move my blacks all the way to the right, that's getting even more affected. It's getting even lighter, which is the opposite of what we wanted to do, remember? So I'm going to have to remember that and then go, well, maybe if I lighten my shadows, but I darken my blacks, can I get the background to look better by darkening my blacks, but then my shadows lights the inside? So anyway, you play around with your options until you discover the best choice. Now, I really, really don't like the noise that's happening here. Why? And let me just actually bring down the shadows again. Let's look at our histogram. We have a clipped histogram. That means that anything that is clipped, which is up there, is, and I'm going to turn this on again, anything that is blue right now, right, that it's already black without detail. So when I try to lighten black without detail, and I'm going to lighten it. When you try to lighten black without detail, lighten it here, what you end up, sorry, I'm going to light. Here we go. When I try to lighten black without detail, it still stays as black without detail. See how the colors haven't suddenly come in anymore. I'm going to turn this off so that you can see without the blue. But what I get is this fake stuff that's this, you know, jangly stuff that doesn't really turn into light gray. It's just that there was no information captured by the camera. It's like trying to make a white sky suddenly have a cloud in it. There was no white, you know, it was so white that there was no clouds. When you make it less white, it just turns into middle gray. It doesn't give me clouds. So here I'm trying to have the camera give me rock texture, but the camera didn't capture any rock texture. It still has raw texture over here. But when you go to that top or to any other of these pieces that has pure black, the camera didn't capture any texture. So all it can give you is this murkyish white gray. Now we can make that a little bit better by taking some of the noise out, but what might be natural noise that we can take out, in the end over here might end up just being pure black, but I'd rather pure black than this kind of dotted stuff. Now it's so intense, I'm not sure how much of this noise we can take out. Let's check it out. I'm going to collapse my basic for a minute here. At whatever setting I have, I just kind of forced this to see the noise. As long as you force either the shadows or the blacks over, you can see the noise. And let's head over to detail. This is where we removed noise last time. Over to detail. And you can leave the basic open too if you have a big screen, but since some of us are in the demo, you might have a smaller screen. That's what I'm saying. Close the one you're not using. I'm going to go back to open detail. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see if there's any color noise. So by the way, notice this rock went green when we lightened it up, whereas this one that has a natural light doesn't go green. And it's not that the place was really mossy, it's just our color shifts when we do this. So let's go ahead and get some color noise reduction, and let's see if I move this to the right, all the way to the right, if anything changes. And I'm doing that. And I'm actually not seeing any color noise change. Are you guys seeing any change? I'm not seeing any change in there whatsoever. Remember to go to 100% now, okay? Because we're looking at noise. I'm not seeing color noise as making, and you guys, that makes sense to me, because this noise that we have here isn't noise from the camera. It's noise that we created by moving our sliders a lot. So it wouldn't be affected by color noise. So let's see if our noise reduction is going to help us at all. So I'm going to work on this and move our noise reduction over. I'm going to force it first of all the way to the right. Extreme noise reduction. So when you do that, yahoo, I've got pure black. But what happened to the rest of it? What I always
It
call
lost
this
the shape. It
we
melted.
lost the detail. It looks like it's made out of kind of plastic, right? I always say if you want to turn anywhere, and again, I told you this before, I told you this last time we used noise, and I said try it on a human face. And the noise reduction pulled all the way to the extreme on a human face. It looks like Barbie, like, you know, Barbie and Ken or something. There's like plastic feature. In this case, it just becomes all icky and blurry and stuff like that. So clearly it's possible to reduce all that noise at the expense. This is what you need to learn, at the expense of what? In this case, detail and texture in my darks, because the rest hasn't been affected. Why? Because there was no noise in it. The light stuff had no noise. So let's move it all the way back.
Diane,
Yes.
I went a different way. I was playing with it while you were talking. I'm sorry.
No,
But
go
I
for it.
went a different way, and I moved shadows up a tiny bit, and then I moved clarity up and vibrance up,
Yeah.
and it gave a real Jamaican look to the
All
sky,
right.
but it opened the cave up.
So here's the thing. She's talking about these down here in this basic, and I'm not denying that there's a ton of other stuff we can do in here. I did say we were going to come back here. I was just trying to this is the stuff we learned last week, that when you get noise, you deal with it in noise, because over here you want to deal with it in noise. And by opening up the shadows or the blacks, and I said I didn't care which, I just wanted you guys to just get some noise in there. How do you deal with that noise? So I'm kind of paused our work in basic, and I'm working with noise right now, because what I taught you last week is when you have noise, you deal with it in here. I'm going to show you the limitation or not of noise, and then we can go back and do our best choice for how we should edit this image. So yes, we will definitely go and explore those tools and see if we get a bit better. So what you're saying is not wrong. It's just not right now the step I'm in. So go ahead and move over to the detail. Spend a little bit of time in there with me, and then we can go back in and try
Yeah, I'm
the
in there.
sliders that you're talking about. So here we are in noise, learning that it's not the fix-all that it was. Now, last week we had a porcelain cup. If you erased a lot of the noise from that porcelain cup, you just got no features. It worked, because a porcelain cup is supposed to have no features. So it didn't like turn it into plasticky. It turned it into what looked like straight porcelain. But now we're talking noise on something that we do want to keep its features, right? We do want to keep the shade and the shadows. So now we need to be much more nuanced with noise. So if I move it, let's say to the middle, as soon as I start losing detail, that's when I need to stop. And then I'm moving it to the middle, and I feel like I've already lost some texture there, and my noise isn't totally gone. But remember, we're trying to play a balanced game, right? So if I say, well, if I move this down all the way to where I have no loss of features, and I move to the right and just look at the good feature. This is an area where we have good detail and good feature. I somewhere around here, it goes from being really textured to beginning to look kind of blurry and plasticky. And then I go up there and I go, okay, I'm at 33 there. I go to the left, that's really noisy. I go to 33 or so. I've reduced a lot of the worst of it, but I haven't lost all the texture that's inside the cave. So that's maybe not a bad compromise. As I said, we still have more to fix, but that might give us some good in between. I was looking at this, was confusing. This was like a little lace, like a plant falling on its head or something. So that might be a good in between setting, because more than that, it begins to just get all blurry and icky, and I don't really have an interior. Now remember, we're faking it because this was a very dark cave, and this, there's only so much you can fake, but you can fake, so to say, or fix much better something that's too dark than something that's too light. So you always you prefer to fix dark stuff. Light stuff can't be fixed. If it's blown out, there's no fixing to it. But if it's too dark, you can. So now there's more masking and detail that we could do in here, but right now I'm going to just go with a main noise reduction, leave it there, and then let's just see the before and after of the detail. That was before, this is after, before and after. And so then I look at the good part of the thing and I go before and after, before and after. And yes, although we had more texture before, I still see that maybe went a bit too far. I don't know. It's changeable, it's fixable, and this is good news. It's completely editable, non-destructive. Let's leave it there. It might have gone a bit too far. But let's open basic again and let's see what else we can do in here in basic. Now, as we played around with these guys, if I move black up again a bit more, as we played around with these guys last week, I mentioned how texture, clarity, and dehaze weren't going to do much of a good job with the cup. I showed them to you, but I said the porcelain cup has no texture. All it did was increase the noise, right? Clarity. These didn't do much for us last week. Now, hopefully this week, make this a little bigger if I can. Now, hopefully this week with this photo, which has a lot of texture in it, we're going to see huge amounts of change in our image when we play with these guys. But again, a little bit to what Barbara said, be careful, because do you really want to add texture to a sky that shouldn't have texture or not? So anyway, let's look at that a little bit and see what's going to happen. My first thing that I want to show you is that when I mentioned that this stuff is a little bit overexposed or light or something like that, we could work with exposure with shadows and highlights, or we could give it a try with a dehaze. Because especially when it's these little mountains that are away, sometimes this is something that can be fixed with hazing. And when you look at mountains where in the back all just kind of gets a little bit lighter and bluer and stuff like that. So even though it's not a hazy day, the tool called dehaze also works with stuff that's just a little bit kind of washed out. So again, it does one thing it diminishes to the left, so it makes it hazier to the left, and it dehazes to the right. So if I were to go to the left, it's going to make it all like hazy, like you're in a misty fog or something. I'm going to double click and move to the middle. To the right, on the other hand, it starts to bring in some contrast. So now let's focus a little bit on what is happening out there when I move my dehaze to the right. What do you guys think? And we're not talking exposure in it. It's beginning to darken those things. Now, if you do too much, it could get like weirdly saturated and stuff and whatnot, right? Because in the end, that's what it's doing. So maybe move the dehaze over a little bit to the right. Now, just to see what happens with the rest, let's put it back in the middle, because we're just trying to learn. These 5 I couldn't show you too well with the porcelain cup. Okay, they were not tools that worked with a white cup too well. But all of these are going to make a huge difference to this image. So let's look at what they do, analyze it, see what's good and what's bad about it. So the good, I do believe that it gave me some more intensity to my colors, but it's also skewing the colors a little bit. My sky's going a little bit kind of intense, a bit unrealistically intense. I'm liking what it's doing to this hill. It's bringing this one into focus. I'm not too sure what it's doing there. And of course, the more you can see what it's doing as you go all the way to the end, then you can really see what's happening. It's banding my sky. You see this little weird blue line that's happening here, and I'm at the extreme end of dehaze. It's really messing things up. If I double click, that should be a blue sky. So anyway, now we saw what dehaze does and saw that maybe a little bit of dehaze wouldn't be bad. Now let's head over to clarity. I started with dehaze instead of from texture in the top, but anyway, clarity is interesting because it's been, when it first came out, it was such a cool tool. It's the first one of these that appeared. And before any of these others existed, clarity appeared. And a lot of photos in the world and the ads and everything began to have this urban grunge look, and it was because of clarity. Move this to the right, all the way to the end, and you might need to go down a little bit to fit in screen, and then do this undo. Move to the right. And what clarity does is increases contrast. As opposed to this contrast, look, when I increase this contrast, what I'm going to get is a lighter interior, light tones and darker dark tones of the overall images, of the overall tone. Versus clarity, it increases contrast between the pixels. So if I move all the way in, and I'm going to go like really high up in pixels, and I go at this level of pixels where you can see them. What clarity does, it's making any pixel that's really dark in comparison to the pixel next to it, it's going to increase the contrast between those two. So it's detail in the contrast in the detailed pixels, not just as a general overall tool. So when I increase clarity, keep an eye on what's happening here. The little black lines are going to get blacker. The white lines are going to get much whiter. See how now I have pure white and pure black there, whereas before I had, whole thing was considered the dark area. But now clarity distinguishes even in the darks, lightening and darkening those little bits and pieces. So now I'm going to go back to 0, and now I'm going to go back here to fit in screen. So now when you see the full effect of that, and again, I throw it way too far over to the right. Now you're seeing like, it's almost, this texture is almost jumping out at you, right? It's like you can almost touch those rocks. It's really intense. If it's a person, that person now looks like street worn or something. If it's a portrait, that person looks gritty and like they have a 5 o'clock shadow, even if they're a woman, right? So depending on what you use these things, it's good or bad. In the porcelain cup, nothing happened. On this cave, texture gets increased. On a face, that looks kind of weird. So you play around with it. Now at least you know what it's doing, and you go, oh, that's kind of cool, because now maybe I'm bringing a little bit back of all that texture that I had lost, that when I had turned the noise off. Maybe I can get some of that back by increasing it over here. Well, let's double click and go down again. So then what's texture? So now I'm going to go ahead and work on texture all the way to the right. And in this photo, texture and clarity seem to be doing some pretty similar things. Again, depending on the photo. Clarity is kind of like throwing a hammer at it and breaking it off, versus texture is like more subtle. For those of you who know the difference between vibrance and saturation, texture is more of a more nuanced tool than clarity. Clarity does it to everything, even what you don't want it to be done, versus texture does it to the things that seem to have less texture. It does it more, and to the things that already have texture, it does it less. So this side is less affected than in clarity, but this side gets more texture in comparison to this, because this is missing texture. So if you move texture all the way to the right, now look at these rocks, and you see how suddenly you can really almost touch those. So again, drop it off to the middle and then move and watch only this, and then move your texture to the right, and see how I've increased texture there where I thought I had lost it. Again, I'm going to now go and approach, go 100%. And now do that again where I can see both sides. I can see this, which is a little bit blurry, and I'm seeing this, which seems to have good texture. When I move this one all the way to the right, If I look at this, I've increased texture a lot, yes, but nowhere near as much as I would have with clarity. Here, it just looks kind of artificial. But if I look to the left and I move texture to the top right, now I feel like I can grab those rocks again, right? So I've got some texture back. Of course, backdrop, I'm getting back my noise, the noise that I thought I had gotten rid of, right? Because texture is basically bringing back noise. So now, of course, I threw the texture all the way to the top. So now I'm going to drop. So all of these many times these things counteract each other, right? So we took noise off here, but what it does, it lost some texture. So then I add texture again, but now I've got noise again. So somehow you need to begin to find the right balance. For each image, there's a place where you find less noise, but more texture, bit more clarity, less clarity, until you find that you have what you want in the image that you prefer. I believe that these need to be shifted around. Right now, I'm going to stop there and put them back at 0 for a minute, because I'm going to show you vibrance and saturation. Then we're going to take a break, and then we can choose what settings we want for all of these. But I want to go back to vibrance and saturation for a minute, because those I wasn't able to show you with porcelain either. So move all these back to 0. And let's go to vibrance and saturation. So saturation is like clarity. It does intense stuff, and it gets your colors, all of your colors, to saturate. So now, if I'm looking out here, it's one thing. If I'm looking in here, it's another thing. If I'm looking here, another thing. All of them, even if they need to be saturated or not, are going to be saturated. I'm actually going to go back to fit so that I can see the whole thing. So when I move to the right, everything gets saturated equally. And by the time I get to the top, way top, you're beginning to have colors that are completely unrealistic. Some people like to process things this way. There's a student of mine who really loves, I always question, it could be that he's slightly colorblind, but everything he does is saturated to this point. But it's imitating those people who used to be Photoshop photography users from you remember Fujifilm, Velvia?
Yes.
Velvia Fuji used to make colors really bright and vivid. So I always say this is kind of like the Velvia Fujifilm. Anyway, but by the time you get to the top, you've got like basically neon stuff going on. And yet you look at that and you go, ooh, but I like how this looks. So you like parts of it, but not all of it. And then, come on, really? Do we think we have this bright little green glass here in the middle of a cave? Not sure. Anyway, double click to send it back to the middle. If you back off on saturation, you end up with black and white. No color whatsoever at the end of black and white. Double click to bring it to the middle. So vibrance, on the other hand, is an intelligent saturation. It grabs all the colors, it looks at it and goes, well, that looks saturated enough, but this doesn't. So I'm going to saturate this more proportionally than I do this. Or this looks saturated, but this doesn't. So I'm going to put my saturation there than that. So it saturates things at different levels, trying to give more oomph to the ones and give you like a parity in colors to your image. So if I move vibrance all the way to the right, again, I'm going to throw it to the max. Oh, wow, how interesting. For the first time in all my ever that I've used vibrance, this is the first time that vibrance to the max does a weird job. How funny. I have
It's mossy.
it's so funny. I have never seen this effect. I had not. It's making my highlights blue. And the inside, look at that. That is so weird. I always demo how much more intelligent vibrance is. Every time I've used it myself where I've demoed it. And this time it's doing a horrible job. How funny. All right. How bizarre. Okay, so we'll try it with another image later and you'll see what I mean. But it's interesting because well, if you think about the description of vibrance, it is doing what it does. It's looking at stuff that has no color, which what happened to this is washed out in comparison to this. And so it's highlighting the fact that it has blue because it's reflecting the sky. So it's giving us the blue that the sky is reflecting on it, versus this doesn't have blue because it's on the inside of the cave and it doesn't have skylight. This is an interior light. There were some lights inside the cave showing us the walls. And so this doesn't have blue because it was fluorescent lighting, which is why it's looking so green on the inside, versus that is daylight, and daylight light is very blue. So anyway, it's saturating the colors here because it had blue that it wasn't saturated enough. How interesting. I like when you discover new things. Anyway, and by the way, that is distracting us because if you look at the green, this has gotten much greener too. It's just that has gotten so much bluer that that's attracting it. But see how this also got really green. Anyway, so maybe a little bit of saturation and a little bit of vibrance is good enough. Although this time vibrance, I don't want that blue, so I don't think vibrance really has much of a game today. All right. So if I only do saturation a little bit, I'm just getting a deeper blue in there, but it's not changing the waters so much. So maybe just a tad of each one for this image. And now that we've seen the effect of these, we can go and say, well, let's see if dehaze had also given me some of that. And dehaze, what it had done, it had given us some saturation. So now if we do too much dehaze, now it's looking really weird. But if we just add a tad of dehaze to it, with a tad of vibrance and a tad of saturation. So play around. My correction doesn't have to be your correction. I don't want you guys to do. I'm talking through what I'm doing. You guys now know what these things do. Play around and see what you want to do. So with these three, we're working on color. And dehaze is a mixture of color and contrast and texture. So now I'm going to go ahead and work on a little bit on texture, a little bit of clarity. I'm going to go back to detail, and I'm going to do a little bit more noise reduction there. Go back to basic and add some more texture to that. But see, now it's getting too saturated. I'm going to back off on saturation because when I added texture and clarity, I also saturated it more. So when you do one, you look at the rest. So I'm going to move. I'm actually going to take vibrance off completely, but I don't know how it's making everything blue. I'm going to just use saturation and clarity. Anyway, you come to a spot where you like, you feel that you got what you want. I also haven't worked at all with the whites. And so now I'm going to darken the whites because darkening the whites is going to give me that intensity here that I had not, I worked with the blacks, but I hadn't actually worked with the white. So that's going to give us that lack of exposure that we had in there. And maybe, I don't really like what highlights do because highlights just makes everything, maybe a tad of highlights down and then whites down. I think this is over processed, but that's okay. I'll show you later how to, I think this is looking a bit too fake there. Bring clarity down. Clarity tends to make things look quite overly. Anyway.
Really orange.
So now, beyond what one of you guys likes over what another one likes, how do we see the effect? How do we go and see what we're doing to this image? I go down here just for a quick overall before and after, and I click on this first one. I go click to turn it off. This is what we started with, and click to turn it on. This is what we have now. Click to turn it off, click to turn it on. Okay, this first choice there. By the way, that's my alarm's been asking me to give you a break for a while now, but I wanted to finish these three. So anyway, so on and off. And when I do that, I go, I really think this is too intense there. So, and I believe that's happening because of the vibrance. So I'm going to back off on vibrance. In fact, I'm going to take vibrance off, which sounds weird, but I just didn't like how that was happening. So anyway, you start playing around with stuff until you go before and after. So the original request, which was, I want to have the bottom, the landscape look better, more intensity in the landscape. And yet I want to lighten the cave walls. That was what we agreed on the vote that we wanted to do. So between the before and the after, have we accomplished that goal with this image? Because you need to always remember that this is subjective, it's art, and you could have chosen to do something totally different. And maybe some of you did choose, maybe you didn't like the general vote and you kept going with your idea. But you have to have a goal in mind and decide, did I accomplish that goal? And in this case, I think that kind of gives us, I think this wall should be a little bit darker still. I'm going to back off on the shadows. I want it lighter, but not so much lighter. I mean, that's light enough. And there you go. Now, if you want to see the nuanced befores and afters, remember it's the second one right here. Click on that. And then you can see before and after sitting right next to each other. Okay. And then as you click, you see that line right there. It's the siders before and after. You click again. Now you have before and afters on top of each other. In this case, doesn't work as well. And then you have the befores and afters with that line right in between. And you can really see how different we made this left side of the wall and the right side of the wall. Not that much change in the background in comparison in this part, but most of the change happened down there and then back to just after. Okay, but this is the quick, totally off, totally on. All right, if you're,
Diane, how did you bring both of them up? So you see both of them.
it's the second box right here, right there. So you cycle, you have to cycle through 5 of them. There's a shortcut where you can make it go to one or the other, but basically the whole point is you're trying to cycle. So once you click that on, right?
Oh, I see it. Okay.
Don't click on any of these in between, go to the last one. And then that last one, you start cycling through them. Okay. And
Thank
then it
you.
closes up again. All right. So for now, we're gonna remember that this is completely editable. So wherever you're at, like it or not like it, wanting to completely continue changing it or saying, I've done, this is perfect, I love it where it is. Now it's time to say, okay, because that was a filter all this time that we were applying to an original image. And now what we can do is toggle it on or off. And then you can see the before and after. Now notice
Before and afters look the same.
toggling on and off from here. There we go. This eyeball on the top works faster than this one because this one processes the filter each time again, versus this one just goes, see it, don't see it, see it, don't see it. Okay, that's a good one to do the before and after. Now we've done so much work on this and it's still a JPEG, but you can't save it as a JPEG anymore because this is actually now a layered file. These are considered layers. So let's save it and then let's take our break. So let's go over to save, file save. And I'm going to give this one, I'm going to leave it the same name, brush mask exposure, because I haven't yet shown you we're going to work with, we're still going to work on that a little bit more with a mask. And the only difference is that it's going to have the same name, but it's going to have PSD because it's a layered file. So we're going to say save and okay. So now it's saved as a PSD and cool. All right. Let's go ahead and get ourselves a 15-minute break. It's 10:53, so 15 minutes would be, one of you guys is good at numbers.
11:08. 11:08.
Thank you. Be back by 11:08 a.m. There it is in the chat. And if you have a chance take a break. But if not, if you have a chance to upload Ken's image, go ahead and do that. If you're the kind that hangs out and doesn't take a break, that I emailed you this morning, and put it in your Photoshop files. And if not, I'll see you guys in 15 minutes. As usual, I'll mute all of you guys so that you can make as much noise as you want. All right, come on back, come on back. So sorry that I'm running late. Had a little disaster in the kitchen. Kids. I went to heat up my coffee and somehow, yeah, unbelievable. I mean, I'm gonna totally miss them when they're gone for college, but on the other hand, you wonder. Someone put a stick of butter in the microwave like that, just a stick of butter, and melted it, and it flooded over and went under the mic. Oh my God. Anyway, a bit, and I didn't discover it until halfway into the break. So half of a break was not enough to deal with a mess of a stick of butter. Anyway, everyone back? Come on back. All right. My hands are all icky. All right. Okay, before I continue, does anyone have a different way they worked on their image, or a comment or an idea or something that they'd like to try? Like Barbara had mentioned that she had done something different on this cave, a better result, a worse result. How about if we do this result? Anything there? Nope. All right. Given the lack of anything there-ness, let's share both images again. I mean, let's share the screen again, and let's go ahead and see what we can do. Hang on. I'm sharing. There we go. I had to move the images around. Okay, so what we have here is I'm trying to see whether to go into the adjustment. Before I go into the adjustment layer mask, let me show you first how this layer mask works. Now, this is a filter mask, so it shows up underneath. We had mentioned that, but it is still a mask. So remember, we applied all of this camera raw filter effect to the entire image. If perchance we decided that we didn't want one part of this image to be affected, that's what we would do with the mask. So let's test it. Let's click on this mask. And for a mask, what you do is you work with a brush. So let's go get our brush, or the B on the keyboard. And since the mask is white right now, that stands to reason that we probably need a black ink on our brush.
Diane, are you still in Bridge?
No, I'm in Photoshop.
In Raw, I mean, you opened it to Photoshop.
No, I closed Raw. So if you're still in Raw, open up. I'm going to open up Raw again. If you're still here in all these Raw things, then you need to go down to the bottom and say okay, and close it up, and then it'll be applied. And now we're inside of Photoshop.
Thank you.
Where Raw shows up underneath. So I'm selecting the mask. I'm choosing the B for brush, or going over to the brush and choosing it. And I'm going to choose black ink. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to hit X because I've got white in the foreground. So I'm going to get black in the foreground. And then I'm going to head over here and check out what opacity my brush is at. And from the last time, all the settings remain the same as the last time. And so in this case, all the settings are set for last time I used this brush as 5%. You always have to look at this because you might start go, oh, nothing's happening. Why? Because you were expecting a big effect. And there is no big effect because you're gently brushing in. So just to demonstrate this, I'm going to put it at 100% again. I don't really want to mask this effect out on this one per se, so I'm going to delete the change later. But say that we decide, oh, I did not want this to be lightened, for example. So now I can just draw a mask over this area and basically take that portion of my image out of being affected by that camera raw filter. So that's what I mean by you can still mask within, outside of camera raw filter. You can just say, well, no, I didn't want that. But it doesn't get, it just gets, all I'm doing is I am eliminating the effect of my camera raw filter on that image. So if I now turn this on and off, the only part of my image affected by the camera filter is the right side of the image. Does that make sense? Now, if this is not what we wanted to do, and what we wanted to do what was different, then I can just go in and now bring it back in paint white. So now I'm going to flip this to white, and I'm going to paint over it. And I'm going to say, no, I do want to see the effect of this. So that's masking. All that does is take the effect that you've applied and let you say not to this, but yes to that, not to this, but yes to that, right? So that's the whole point of the camera raw, of a mask, no matter that it's on an adjustment layer or on a camera raw. It's to say, please apply or don't apply. So now I've managed to make everything white again. So now the entire filter, this effect is being felt by my entire image. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and leave this one white. I just wanted to show you that it works the same way as any mask that we've had. So I don't necessarily want to mask any of this effect off. On the other hand, there is a possibility that I want the whole thing to affect the image less. And now I'm talking about the whole effect of the camera raw filter, right? Like, oh, maybe I went overboard on this. I want the whole thing to take it down a notch. So now we're not using the mask. I mean, I guess I could put a 5% gray brush over everything or whatever, but there's an easier way. I go over to this side of this place. It says camera raw filter, where I have the eyeball, I have the name, and then on the far right, I have this little icon, just sliders. And I'll double click on that. And I just get this little option that come up. And there's other things I can do with this. I can go into blending modes up there, but I'm not going to go into blending modes now. Basically, I can just take it down. I can just take it down and say, I want to apply it at 50%, for example. So half of the effect of what I did is actually affecting it. So again, that's my 100% of all of the filters that I decided this thing needed. And then I go, I went overboard half. Now, a lot of the times what happens is when I'm done with camera raw, when I'm done and I look at it and I go before and after, I go, it's overboard. I might come back and go, well, maybe 90% of it, right? So it's especially on a face, on something, you might want to tone down what you did a bit because the after effects of it might be too intense. But that's what it is. You're just basically masking the whole thing out a little bit, but equally. This is not nuanced. The whole thing goes down. So if you think that the whole thing needs to be toned down a bit, this is the way to go. I'm going to say cancel because I don't want to tone it down. But if what you think is that only parts of it have to be toned down, then you go to the mask and you just maybe affect only the dark area or only the light area or only the sky. So there's the whole point I'm telling you this is mainly because when you're in camera raw inside of this filter, so now I opened the whole filter again, you might go, well, I love what's happening to everything else, but I don't like what's happening to the color, like I said with vibrance. So if I go to vibrance again, I kind of liked what vibrance was doing to the rest, but I didn't like what was happening with the sky. But at this point, I had no way to control that, right? So I could have just said, okay, I don't mind if vibrance make my sky too blue. What I can do later is I can just mask out a little bit less the portion of the blue sky that's too much. Does that make sense? So I can just say, okay, I'll be fine with the fact that the blue is going crazy, but I really like what it's doing to these colors inside. So now when I say, okay, I'm left with a too blue sky. But if I like the rest, then I can go into my mask. I can grab my brush and I can go, well, I'm going to just make a 20% or something like that, 15% brush on this. And then I'm going to mask out the effect of that whole filter. I'm only mask out what it's doing here to my sky, just so that this part doesn't go so wild and crazy, right? So then I've just got a little bit of a masking here on that. Okay, so that's just a way to show you how to adjust some. So maybe you think this green went a bit too intense. I'm using a percentage of a brush to just drop a little bit the effect on some areas of that mask that I applied. And in this case, that makes me happy. Now I think that might be good without affecting it too much. Now, in fact, I do still think that the blue is too intense, even after the mask, I don't like it too much. So if I go back into Camera Raw filter and I take back the vibrance that I had done, now I have to be careful because when I say, okay, I'm not seeing the masking here. The masking is happening outside of Camera Raw. So now I left the blue the way I like it, which is with much less blue, right? I didn't want it to be so intense. But then when I say, okay, now I still have the mask that I had applied before. So now I need to delete that mask. And how do you delete the mask? By painting in the opposite color. So now I have to switch back to white, right? And then I go over here and I go back and I switch, but now I can go back to 100% and just completely get rid of the fact that I had masked it. Oh, no, I didn't mean that. I just wanted to paint white, not black. And I want to paint white over this area so that it's back to the blue that I want. Okay, so be careful if you have masked this and then you make changes, that those changes now are completely out. This mask is outside of Camera Raw filter. So it's in addition to, okay, it's not part of it. Does that make sense? The demo I just made? Like, you got to be careful because they don't, when you're in Camera Raw filter, you don't see the effect of this mask. You see everything. Okay, that last little bit, if you don't do that's fine. I was just showing you a bit how to make sure which part is being affected by which. All right, so I'm fine with this, but say that I do want to now apply something to the caves. Maybe I want to keep lightening it up, or now I decide I want to darken it that I didn't before, or now I decide that I want the cave to be, you know, bright blue or whatever. Now I can do that by applying a layer mask. And this one, again, just to show you the effect of a layer mask, this isn't necessarily the best time to do that, but I wanted to give a little bit more oomph to the stuff here inside of that. You guys choose whatever you want to do, but I want to just give a little bit more darkening to this stuff, right? I still think that this needs some more intensity, but I don't want to do that inside of Camera Raw because then the whole thing will get intense. So I'm going to go ahead and create maybe a levels adjustment layer. And remember how now I'm getting this no, because I have my brush on and I'm getting this, nope, can't do it because it's a smart object. But adjustment layers can still affect smart objects because they were always non-destructive. So I can go ahead and create at the very bottom where we've done them before. I can create, and this one, because of the positioning of my Photoshop, the menu is going down, so you don't see it, but I can move it up. I can create an adjustment layer that's levels. And now, since it's not masked yet, it's going to affect everything, but I'm going to keep my eyes on only this portion if I can, and I might need to go and get it bigger so that I can kind of hide the rest of it out. Just want to look at these rocks and make that area look better. But when I first adjust for that, everything goes darker. But if I can focus my eyes on just this, I really like that. So before that and this, I like my rocks much better now in there. See that? I like that. So all I did is I moved my midtones a little bit, and I can move them a lot a bit or whatever, but you see how I'm affecting everything, right? I'm going to go back and the midpoint is 1. Okay, so down here in the middle, that's 1. Anything I do to the right begins to affect it. And so maybe I'll go about, sorry, the midpoint is 0. I'll leave it somewhere like that. So now I like what's happening here. Play around until you find you like what's happening in here, but I don't like what happened everywhere else. So who remembers what I need to do? We did this quite a few times by now. I'm going to take the effect off of this image. What do I do?
Reverse the mask. I mean,
yeah, inverse the mask, and that's a Command I or Control I. So now I know that I have a capacity to darken. That's what that levels was, but now I need to choose which area I want to darken. So now I go grab my brush again. I make it a little bit smaller. And then I go in here and maybe I don't want to darken it all at the same time. If I go to 100%, I'm applying the whole thing. Maybe I'm gonna go 50% or something like that with my brush. And then I'm gonna start painting it in the areas where I think it needs it most, which is, I think, all of these little rocky areas and a little bit of that water. And there we go, I'm darkening that rock a little bit, but not everything. I liked how the rest was. Just wanted a little bit more darkness on this. So the more I have a 45% brush, 50% brush. So 2 swipes give me 100%, right? So I'm gonna undo those 2, one on top of the other. But the first one is only 50%. But if I keep going at it, then that's it. Then I've given it 100% of what that filter offers. Okay. And I go, well, maybe I want to darken this too. So then I go in there, but maybe this mountain only needs one little click. Maybe this bottom part of the sky can have a little bit more intensity, but not the rest. So there you go. So now you are selectively darkening only portions. And if you turn this eyeball on and off, that's the only part affected is really that interior of that little cave, of the outside of the cave, but just the bottom portion of these rocks. Okay. I was able to do that because I was able to put in a mask. Now, let me know if you have any questions about this or if you need help getting this done. This is an adjustment layer. It goes on top, and then the filter went in the bottom. How's it going? Did that work, you guys?
Yep.
All right, let me know if you have any questions. Other than that, give me a good old yes if it worked. If you're still working on it, but it's working, give me a yes. And the beauty of this approach is that I can just turn that off and turn that off, and I'm still back at my original image. Like I haven't actually done anything destructively. But look at the difference between what I started with and what I ended with. Now, I'm not saying that this might have been the choice. I probably would have chosen to darken the outsides. As you know, when we said, what do you guys prefer? I probably would have preferred to darken the outsides and have more of a contrast. I think maybe it's getting kind of busy right now, but it doesn't matter. It's a matter of choosing what you want the image to do. And so if what we wanted was to do that, we can do that. Let's go ahead and save. Command S or Control S. Now, I'm going to clear your answers, and just from this group that's here, have you been able to download that image that Ken sent that I put in your email and add it to your Photoshop files? So I'm seeing Mary saying yes. Most of you are saying yes. Monica? Yep, down there, your yes appears in your second computer. How about Rob? Are you there, Rob? I don't see, both of your screens are off.
Oh, really?
Fine.
Yeah, I was able to save it in my on my desktop, so I can
You can
right-click
access
it to
it.
Photoshop.
Cool. And Ken, it's the image that you sent me. So
I don't see it in my bridge.
yeah, but oh, it's not in your
Oh,
bridge.
Oh, wait.
It's since you are doing VDI, it should be because I put it in there.
Yeah.
Right next to Kelly's photos because it says Ken.
Yeah, let me.
Actually, Linda's on VDI, so she's seeing it. So it's there. Maybe you need to refresh your bridge or something.
Okay.
Or look for it alphabetical order. Maybe if it's by time, you might have it at the end. If not, you can do a little quick search. You can head over here and bridge to the bridge search content and just write the word Ken, since that's how it starts. As long as it says sort by, by file name and you hit the return, then it'll pop up with Ken. Okay. So I'm gonna undo that I just did. Can I? Now I'm gonna take the Ken word out of there. I'm gonna go back to my Photoshop class files. But did you see what I did, Ken? As long as you're in your folder, your class. Oh, you might be looking at the files that are in your My Drive, like your drive, instead of the files that are in. You know what? Everyone else, go ahead and open it. Open that JPEG. Ken, if you share your screen with me, I'm thinking that you might be pointing to my drive photos instead of the shared drive photos, and I can help you do that in a second. You want to share? Can you hear me? Can your
Yeah,
sound?
yeah,
Yeah,
I can hear you.
all right, so go ahead and give me a
Um,
quick. I think that what's probably happening is that you made a copy of your photos into my drive, your drive, so to say, when I say my, the one that's called my drive. And that's why you're not, this photo is in the shared drive. But I can get you there in 2 seconds if you turn your screen over to me.
Hold on.
Okay. And no, you are in shared drives. That's interesting. You're not in the My Drive. So then go ahead and you're in Google Drive, shared drives, Photoshop. Okay, so go ahead and double click that folder there.
Let's see, it's the fall 2022 Photoshop class files, isn't it? Should I just go to that or?
Yeah, no, go to the folder that's already there.
Okay.
Double click on that one. Yeah.
Okay,
Tap that. Go ahead. Okay. And then once again, inside of there, go to that fall 20, the top left folder.
okay.
I just don't know if the one that you have down there in the shortcuts is
Oh,
actually, I just didn't know if it was actually going to the one in your drive or in my drive, so to say. So now I just, by going
yeah,
to this
here it
one, we
is.
know for sure there it is. So there you
Yeah,
go.
no, I see it now. Yeah, okay.
You were probably in my drive. Okay, so double click on that one and open it up. Stop your sharing and cool. Now let me cue you guys' feedback. And let's head over to share my screen. Here we go. There we go. So I need to go to Bridge, and here we are. So I'm going to double click and open it up in Photoshop. Now again, it's a JPEG. I could have opened it up first by right clicking, open camera, and done all my work there, but I want to have more nuanced access to it. So I'm actually going to do it this way. You need to be aware though that there are some drawbacks to doing it this way. I'm painting it as it's the best way, but in reality, if you do not want to have this object turned into a smart object, because you can't, there's some things you can't apply to an image when it's a smart object, then plan B is to do it how we did at the beginning. First modify it and then bring it into Photoshop and continue from there.
Modify it.
But right now we're gonna, instead, I was going to teach you 2 different ways to modify this image. First, I was going to teach you how to do it with Camera Raw. Then I was going to teach you how to work with it in with adjustment layers. But we're running slightly short on time to demo both of them. The class ends at 11:55, right? So let's first do the one that's quick, and then I'll show you how the second one would work, and then you guys can work on that as homework. So the first one we're going to do, we're going to modify this as a Camera Raw and see. We're going to go to filter and first of all convert for smart filters.
Where'd you go? Where'd you go? Where'd you go?
And so then we're going to say okay to that, and there we go. Now it's protected, right? Then we're going to head back up to the filter. And we're going to choose Camera Raw filter.
Convert to profile. Convert.
Okay.
I'm
so
sorry,
now-
Diane. Where did you get that? I opened the photo, but you went someplace.
Okay.
that
So
couldn't-
I'm in Photoshop.
right.
Okay. So go up to the word filter. And the problem is that I can't demo that in, you go up to the word filter. That's the one word that doesn't show up when I share my Mac screen.
Okay.
And then down there, we go to convert for smart filters, which I already did, so
Got it.
mine is grayed out. Okay.
Thank you.
Then you go back to the same filter and you go to open camera raw.
Oh, all right.
Got it?
To open camera.
And so now you have camera raw.
Camera raw filter?
Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. So now let's look at this image. So this is Ken. Thank you, Ken, for sending this image. His request, well, you guys tell me, what do you think this image might need? There's some obvious things and some maybe a bit less obvious. What do you guys think the image needs?
The shadow across his face is kind of wonky.
Mhm. All right, good. Shadow on his face. What else?
His forehead, there's like a bright spot on the forehead.
The highlight on the forehead. That would be the second thing we want to handle. Okay, so those are the two most clear, obvious ones. There's one more that I want to address that might not be very clear, and a second that's more of a choice. So the one else that I want to address that's maybe not so obvious is even at less than 100% right now, there's one thing that I want you to notice. What's up with the focus of this image? What do you think?
It's focused on the wall behind him. That seems to be the sharpest.
The
No.
wall and or what other part of this image looks very, very in focus?
In focus?
Very, very in focus right now. Someone mentioned the wall, which is not wrong, but there's something even more obvious.
A purple area on the back.
Not necessarily. Look down here at his hand in his pocket.
Mm.
If you go to 100% and you check, look at you can see the texture of the jeans. You can see the stitches on his hand. You can see the texture of his skin, the texture of this cuff, the t-shirt. All here is very, very sharp. And then as you move up, just a bit of a distance further away is the elbow. It's 2 inches further back or 3 or 4 inches further back, and it's already getting a little bit out of focus. And his face is a bit sooner. Now, this is a very, very shallow depth of field taken with a very high aperture. So what it means that there's only a small part of the image that's going to be in focus. And you have to imagine focus is happening as if it was on like if you could insert this whole picture with a plate of glass, not that we want to kill Ken here, but if we could slice them up with a glass, this image this part is in focus, but a little bit behind that is already out of focus. Focus is at this plane. So when we looked up here, someone said that the wall, I think Sabrina or Monica mentioned that the wall here was a little bit more in focus. And yes, it's definitely more in focus maybe than what's down there. But see, a head and a face juts forward now a few inches, right? Imagine your whole chin and nose. They are forward from that plane. This hand is further back. Put your hand in your pocket and look at your face. Your face is quite a bit forward. And he seems to be leaning up against the wall with his body and his face even a bit more forward. So his face is nowhere near as sharp as this area of the image. And there's a bit more focus, as you said, well, like even on this part of the texture of this t-shirt, this edge, than on his face. So it's not out of focus though, but we might want to also work on enhancing the focus on his face area because it's a portrait. You want the portrait to have a face that has focus, at least some part of the face. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So again, it's not overt. That's why I said it's subtle. It's not a horribly out of focus image where you would notice it, but we could try to enhance the focus in the face area. The last comment I mentioned is that the light, it's interesting, but light clearly is coming from over there, right? Yet over here, it looks like it goes suddenly, it begins to be blown out again, as if there was some other light source or something here, or maybe a figure in the image. For some reason, it's beginning to go really bright over here. See that? So whenever there's a bright edge to a photo, our eyes kind of want to wander away into that bright edge. So if this were not to be so bright, we would stay in this area. Once this is well processed, it would be more comfortable to stay in this area, which is the point of a portrait, and not to have us go, oh, what's more comfortable for my eyes? And so we'll just kind of walk around a different area, and our eyes get drawn to light stuff, which is why we all are made, I don't know if you noticed, but you might have been drawn to these bright spots more than to this side of his cheek. If you look at that side of his forehead. So, all right. Now, this is a very recognizable human being, right? Even Photoshop can look at this and think within its machine learning, oh, this is a human. And this human has contrasty light, very contrasty light, meaning very light and very dark. And we need to make less contrast on his face. We need to lighten the shadows and darken the light areas. So let's see if we try this little auto right there to see if Photoshop figures that out. Click on that. What do you think? That was pretty wow, right?
It
I've seen-
intensifies it, everything.
Yeah. So now turn that off and turn it on, and then look at the different areas of the photo. What did it do well? What did it not do well? Look at the face, then look at this edge, then look at the focus. I mean, look at all the different, areas and tell me. Look at this background that before we had no idea what it was. Now, when you turn it on, I can immediately imagine that that's probably, I don't know, I imagine the solstice workshop or something like that because of the bright colors and stuff. I mean, I don't know if that's where it is, but I can begin to see some stuff in there before it was just this black area. For better and for worse, let me say, because if this was a portrait that was an environmental portrait showing Ken at work, for example, at the solstice workshop, then this doesn't tell enough of that story. But if this is supposed to be a portrait of Ken and nothing else, then now that I enhanced it with the auto and his face looks much better and the focus is much better, this is now a little bit distracting because it also got intensified because Photoshop thought, oh, that's really dull, so let me add some color to it. But now my eye does get attracted to that and goes, but it's not really enough information there to tell me what this is. So it can't, I'm guessing it something, but it could be a column that's got light, blue, purple light on it. I mean, I don't know what it is, but it makes me curious. And then I'm not looking at the portrait, right? So maybe in this case, what I'd want to do is say, sure, I like what's happening here, and maybe I can work further with it, but maybe I don't want this effect to happen on these. I want to keep that maybe in this more mysterious tone because I don't want it to distract from Ken. Does that make sense? Remember, a photo is supposed to tell a story. A portrait without much environment to it, which just doesn't happen, means that it's not about the environment. It's about him and only him. If instead you were trying to tell a story about him and his element, then maybe this isn't the portrait to choose. So we're going to say, since this is the portrait we have, that we just want to see Ken. Now, do we want to see him, his whole relaxed body pose, his hands, whatever, or do we want to just cut in and see just his face? Those are other choices that you make. But right now, all I'm going to say is we're not cropping anything out. We're just working with what's there. If we like this beginning help and we want to leave it there to direct us where to start, because sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. So let's say we like what it's doing. Then now we start going down these and, well, what happened? Let's analyze. It worked a tad higher on exposure, a tad higher on contrast. It went back on highlights. It added some light into the shadows. You kind of look at what Photoshop did, and that's also a way of learning. You go, they didn't add texture, clarity, or dehaze, but they did add some vibrance, okay, and a bit of saturation, which accounts for all of this. Now, this is all that this auto does. It doesn't do auto for a lot of other stuff. If I look over here in details, it didn't add any sharpening or anything. So the fact that we see his face better isn't because sharpening would be to put it in focus. The fact that we see his face better isn't virtue of having sharpened, but just by virtue of having corrected some of that light. Suddenly you can see the texture of his skin now. It's just, it was too blown out in the whites and it was too hidden in the darks. So suddenly it doesn't look so out of focus as it did before. And all we did is correct the lighting. Interesting, right? Without having focused anything, what was happening is that the stuff that was too bright didn't let us see the texture of his skin. The stuff was too dark was hiding it. So suddenly we can see better. And we might still want some enhanced focus and they're not, but it already is looking as if it's more focused, because in the end, enhancing focus is just a trick of the eye. We're going to do something like this to the light to enhance focus. And it's not like we're really going to be able to focus it more. We're not there. The photo has been taken. We can't refocus. So all we can do is enhance focus with tricks of light. And so this trick of light already makes him look more in focus. All right, Ken, this is you. Any comment you want? Anything else you want to say? Do you want to tell us what this is? By the way, you don't need to know what it is. You're going to decide what you want your end product to be. I'm telling the rest of the people now. But Ken, this is his photo. And he might want to tell us whether he wants that or not enhanced. And that's his right, because it's the photo of himself. The rest of us can still do whatever we want with it. But Ken, what do you think?
I was just going to kind of like blacken it out or darken it so that it wouldn't show up, because I think near the bottom there are some plants, and I don't know what the other stuff is near the top.
Okay, so
Yeah.
thanks for agreeing then, at least in this case, with my point of view that this just becomes more distracting and that it isn't of importance. So yeah,
Right.
let's work on darkening it. But instead of doing it in here, now we're going to know that what we need to do is do it with a second adjustment layer mask in Photoshop, right? Because here we like what these did to the rest of you. And if we turn it down to turn that to enhance, to take this enhancement off, it's going to take that off your face too. Now, there is a nuanced way to work with this, with some masks that are new inside of Lightroom, inside of, well, Lightroom 2, inside of Camera Raw, where we could have just focused only on his face. But since we're just doing the auto, there's no mask here. All of this is applying to the entire image, right? So can we go further? Can we say, well, I want to work even more with these things? Sure, you can say, okay, this is what Photoshop did. What if I go a little bit further or bring something back down? So maybe I want to darken the lights a little bit more. So I'm going to go over to the whites and see what happens if I move them a little bit to the left or to the right. And I'm kind of liking, I'm going to actually bring the whites down a tad even more than Photoshop did. I think that's a bit more even.
Okay.
If I go too far into the highlights, you're going to get all this like shiny forehead as if you were all sweaty. So that's not going to work. Now, let me just show you something though. I'm going to go extreme on the whites for a second. This here, and I forced it, right? But I made a lot of whites white. This is an example of white without detail, white without detail. Like in this case, if this how the original image came in, there's no fixing this part nor that part, because you can't invent skin under it, right? But in this case, if you go all the way, you darken the highlights and you darken the whites as much as you can, and you darken the shadows as much as you can, like, and you darken the blacks as much as you can, no matter what I do, no matter what I try, there's one spot left here that does not come back in. What's that?
There's one on his neck also.
And there's a little spot right there. So those two spots, and maybe a tad on his nose, that's just not fixable. Okay, so there's no skin there. The camera has not recorded any skin. There's just white. So no matter what I do to the image, I've darkened it as much as I can. I'm not going to get skin texture in the shiniest part of this part of the forehead, maybe down right above his eyebrow, nor on his neck, nor on that little tad in his nose. The rest, though, for better or for worse, even this that was looking bright, when I go to my extremes, which I just did, I discovered that I did have texture in that area. It was just too light, so it was hiding it. Maybe a little tad over here finally blows out. For the most part, there was texture on the whole wall, right? So this is not inherently fixable. What we can do is we can retouch it, or we can add with an adjustment layer a little bit more of skin tone. We can bring skin tone from the part of his forehead, but the image will not bring it up naturally on its own with enhancements because it's just not there. Got it? So those bright spots is what you need to avoid. You already saw that a dark spot like that cave was able to be brought up. Dark has been imprinted in your camera. It's just imprinted so much that it got too dark, but it's there. You can lighten it up. But too light hasn't even registered. The camera didn't catch it before the photo was finished. So that is not recoverable. Lightness is not recoverable. White without detail is not recoverable. Okay. Versus something that's too dark, you can bring it back in and lighten it. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and hit back auto to go back into undo all the mess that I just made, and know that no matter what I try, that there, now I see those spots and I go, oh yeah, there they were. There's just nothing I can do at this post at this level with them. All right. So I did say that I wanted to enhance maybe a little bit, bring down the whites a bit more so that I see a bit more of that. So you just play around with it a bit more to see. You don't need to trust that the computer did their job well. You might want to lighten the shadows a bit more. So from what the computer did to what I'm doing now, I've actually flattened it even more. I've actually lightened more his gray and darkened more the gray. By the gray, I mean the midtones, because remember that these are seen as a black and white. And so this would be a middle gray tone here, or a darker middle gray tone. So I've lightened the middle gray tones further than what Auto did, and I've darkened the white tones further than what they did. So now from the before down here and after, this is what I have. I can choose. What's that? I can.
Diana, I had a
Yes,
question.
yes.
My VDI has frozen up and I can't do make any changes. And I'll just have to go out of it and
Unfortunately,
bring it
yeah,
back in again?
last week at the end of class, my VDI froze and there was nothing I could do. You
Okay.
have to pretty much close it. But then when you open it again, one possibility is that since you're going to have to close it without signing out of Google Drive, when you open it up again, you might need to refresh that Google Drive or not.
Right.
That said, it is 11:54, so we have one more minute of class. So at this point, don't worry, just watch this last little bit and then just reproduce it yourself, like once you recover your whole thing. So for now,
Okay.
hang out. It's a pity that it's your portrait and that you can't finish it off, but what we did right now is simple. We just hit auto. We moved these a little bit more. I ended up enhancing the tones a little bit more. Maybe you want to decide if you want to warm it up a little bit or not. So you might choose. I'm going to just, because we never went in here, right? We didn't change this. So we didn't check to see between as shot and auto. And yeah, auto decided to warm it up a little bit more, just like I thought. So I warmed it up a little bit more too. I kind of think his skin needed a bit more color, a bit more vibrance. Now, the sunglasses might have been very browny orange, right? But maybe our enhancements made them even more orange. And you might go, well, I'd rather that look less orange. I want to have that be a bit more skin tony. That's another example. We can fix that in Photoshop. We can't fix it here. Okay. So if I look at the before,
What's going on?
and after, I can see that they weren't really orange. They're probably brown sunglasses. Yet with all the fixings that we did, it turned to be really orange behind these glasses. So that's something that I think we need to mask out in Photoshop and bring the color back to a bit more regular skin tone, a bit more browny like it was originally. See that? What do you guys think? Not the tone, not the darkness that was inside of there, but the color. Suddenly he looks like he has two orange pumpkins or something in there, right? So this fixed a lot of stuff, but it also messed up. Yeah, Barbara?
There's his left eye.
Yeah.
As you're looking at it, the one on the right, there's like a vertical rectangle.
Yeah.
Right where you just had your.
Yeah, I see it too. So that's, I don't.
Like a reflection or something.
Yeah, so maybe he's looking at some bushes or something. I'm not sure exactly what he's looking at there. but they're being reflected in his glasses there, you see? So it does cause a little bit of a weirdness. Now, if you had even one full eye,
Yeah,
you could kind of clone that over here and imitate it, but neither one of the two eyes is full. See that?
Can you take a half an eye?
What?
Could you take the outside of the right eye and
You-
flip
yes.
it over?
Yes, and I could probably do that with a few hours of work.
That would be
It's
hard,
not,
wouldn't
but
it?
it's doable. It totally is doable, but to make it look realistic, I could do that. Now, if I had the whole eye, it wouldn't be a few hours of work. It would be much less. But the
Right.
fact that I need to match one eye to an eye that doesn't exist, that then will end up in nothingness is going to be harder, but it's doable. In Photoshop, you can do all of that. But here's the thing I'm about to say. If another solution, we didn't see that before in the before. It was so dark that it wasn't an issue. So maybe what needs to happen is not only in Photoshop, do we need to change the color so it goes back to being brown, but we can also darken this one, which makes sense. It's on the darker side. We can darken this one a little bit to, like, with some retouching, at least take that weird texture that it looks like it's got little spots. You can retouch that out. And I haven't taught you retouching tools yet. We're going to work with retouching tools next week. So then we can retouch that out so that at least it ends up like that, like smooth and not necessarily full of little tiny dots that do end up looking like there's a Band-Aid on the glasses or something like that, right? So anyway, all of that can be done. Yes. Right now, what we're all going to do is just say okay to that. I want to be, I want to be clear to everyone that yes, class has been over for 3 minutes. So if you need to leave, leave. I will only do a few more things, which is exactly what we just did to the other photo, which is I'm going to add a quick adjustment layer where I'm going to just darken the stuff that I don't want and lighten this bit a little, darken the two things that we said, but I'm not going to work anymore on his face or do any of the things we just talked about. So if you need to leave, I'm just doing this now. Okay. Only I'm doing it to this one. All right. So I'm going to do that and then I'm going to close the class up. So if you are done, go ahead and leave or check the last 10 minutes of the recording later. But now I'm just going to go over to levels and I'm going to just look at something that darkens this. So I'm going to go ahead and darken my shadows so that it's kind of out of the way again, out of the interest level. So that gives it some darkness, maybe even a little bit darker by moving the blacks in, thing like that. I might need to bring down the saturation because even though I'm making it darker, it's still pretty saturated. So that purple is still showing through. So anyway, I'm darkening it a little bit. And now I'm going to go in here and inverse this with a Command or Control I. And then I'm going to put a brush and I'm going to go ahead and just, I'm going to go with 100%. And I'm going to go 100%, apply that to this so that I can brush this out. Now, be careful if you use one of these very soft brushes because it don't want it to leak onto the wall. So you might need to harden your brush on the edge so that you don't have that leak onto the wall. That said, the colors are still remaining very saturated. So I might need to add a saturation mask in there. So I'm going to go ahead and do another adjustment layer of hue saturation. So here's the hue saturation. I'm going to desaturate all the colors. There, I've desaturated the whole thing, but my goal was only to desaturate that area. So again, I'm going to say Command I, and then I'm going to go ahead and brush it in this area. So I'm really taking the purple out of there. So it just becomes kind of a non-entity. And if you didn't know, remember what I said about Mary's picture. Right now, we all know that we changed something. But if you don't know that, if you don't know that this used to be purple or whatever, and you just look at this picture, you just don't look at it anymore. You're just looking at him, right? So she took those people out. And if you only see the after, you don't look to see what changed. You just don't look at that area. We can even darken it even more with other stuff. We can also darken this one area. So I can see if I go to the levels that darken this area, maybe I can brush in here. And unfortunately, white with 100% brush, this was too much. But if I bring my mouse to a much smaller amount, maybe I can just darken this a little bit, 20%. And look at that. I just recovered the texture on the wall right there without it looking weird. on the same mask, let me show you the mask. Sorry. I just used 100% white on this and I used only 20% of it here, right? So that this was a brush that just was enough to bring that in from where it was. So now it's even, and now it's not an entity. It's not good or bad. It's just not there. We don't look at that corner anymore. It's just a corner. And then I'm left with, well, now how do we continue to fix or not fix what we like about this image? Okay. So that's all I did here. I have two masks, one which darkened the left side back and forth there. And then if you look at the far right side, it also darkened the far right side a little bit right there. And then right there. But I was left with this, like heightened color. So then I added a hue saturation mask. And if you think it's too much, you'd like a bit of color back, I can just double click on it and just bring a bit of the color back. So it looks like it has a tad of color there. It's not so saturated, you know. And of course, later, if you really think it's a portrait of him, you might wonder whether maybe you can cut some of this off or something. But I like that there's not just a blank wall behind him. That would be boring. So this has a little bit of something behind him. And then the thing that's left to us to see is whether we can enhance a little bit focus and just fix the glasses a little bit, because I really don't like the orange stuff. And again, I know class is over. Just the quickest fix in the world, because we're going to move on to a different photo. I'm going to grab a quick selection tool. So I'm not sure how good this fix is going to be, but I'm going to do a quick selection there and there just to grab the glass. But see, then that glass, see that grab too much of the glass. And so I'm going to undo that. I don't want it to grab that. So I'm going to make my a bit smaller. I'm going to have to hold down the Option key to take away. And I'm going to take away of this, just so that I only affect the insides and not necessarily the outsides. So I'm holding down my Option key and slowly with the outside edge of my brush, taking the frames away. Okay, just by clicking a tad on the frame. So see how now I've been left with only that. Now, torn about what to do with the bridge of his nose, because it probably is getting a little bit orange too. I think I'll take that away. And I'll leave only the area that was truly under his glasses. So I've left just the stuff that was under his glasses that I thought turned a little bit orangey. That's the only thing I've left in my selection. So once again, it's my quick selection mask that I first did a general selection, and then I enhanced or adjusted the selection by taking away, holding down my Alt or Option key, taking away stuff that I thought I didn't want, or clicking without the Option Alt key to add if there was something I did want more into it. That's all I'm doing here, kind of readjusting that thing. Now with that selection made, I'm gonna see if I can go up, and I'm not sure if it's going to be hue saturation or if it's going to be a gradient color, but I'm going to try hue saturation. And let me see if I can just bring some saturation down from inside of there. See, that's the before. See how it was very, very saturated, and I'm taking that down, thinking that maybe vibrance might do it. That's the before, and this is the after. Not sure I like this solution. It is helping, but I think vibrance might be better. But anyway, right now, that's the orange glasses, and this is the non-orange glasses. Problem is that now they look like reading glasses. They don't look like sunglasses. You know what I mean? Because I took all the color out. So maybe if I darken them a little, I'll go back into my levels where I had some darkness. I have no idea if this is going to work. I'm going to put my brush in here, and I'm going to see what if I now darken a little bit what was in there. They look like sunglasses again. Only I'm just kind of darkening the skin. So now they're back to being sunglasses, which would explain why we're not seeing his eyes as well if these were clear glasses. So now there, so that darkens it, but this took the saturation off. So now I back off and I go, okay, I think those look like, I mean, I could work a little bit further to try and make them look like they were brown. But right now, again, who knows what color sunglasses he had? All we know is that his sunglasses don't look bright orange now. They look, first we darkened the whole thing, then we darkened the background, and then we took that intensity off of the color with the hue saturation. So this is the the before and after of all three of our adjustment layers. This is what we ended up, this is where we started. This is where we ended up after Camera Raw filter. And this is where we end up after all the adjustment layers. We could keep working with enhancing. I need to still, put skin in there and stuff, but that's new stuff, retouching that I can't do because I'm just in the after minutes of this class, just repeating stuff we've done. But I don't want to go any further in this because now I'm done quite a bit more that maybe students who had to leave didn't get. So, keep playing. Enhance it the way whatever you want. Give them a pink t-shirt. I don't know. Play around. Enjoy it. Have fun. And when you're done, do a screenshot and post. Now, once again, here we're done and I forgot. Please do a screenshot. Ideally, you do a screenshot of the before and after and post this up on the Padlet. This one here, we didn't do much, so you don't need to do a screenshot of that, but definitely do a screenshot of your after of your cave. And then if you want to do a screenshot of the after of Ken, if you're good at, like Linda the other day, she did a before and after. If you're comfortable doing befores and afters, then do a before and after of Ken for your Padlet, or just do the afters. Okay, and I can post the before next to it so we can all compare to the before and after. All right. So hopefully, Ken, once your VDI fixes itself, you can do this. All right.
Right, I'll give it a try.
And then remember, you can't save this. If you tried to save this right now, it's a JPEG. Not only will it not save, but it'll also tell you, oh, you're going to have to rasterize this. That means that it wants to flatten your image. You should say no, say save as, and then save it as a save as, and then you'll be fine. You can keep modifying this to your heart's content until you get, like I would still darken. I still think there's too much light on this side of his face and thus on the side of the t-shirt. So I might darken that a little bit with another levels, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, have fun. Post the final products and I will see you next week, you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got to watch this video. I'm lost on several things.
That's fine. I
I'll
just
catch
kind of,
up.
with Ken, I just kind of zoomed through doing stuff that we've done. So just that's why it's so good you have the video to slowly now tackle it on your own. And then mainly I'd like you guys to tackle this on your own images and find some other image that you have that's very contrasty and see if you can work on it. There's another way of working outside of Camera Raw on these darks and lights that I'm gonna show you, which is the dodge and burn, but this was a good combo of adjustments and Camera Raw. So, right, guys.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
See you on
Bye.
Tuesday.
See you next. Oh yeah, you on Tuesday, the rest of you on Friday. Bye. She's in my Mac classes too.
Bye now.
Bye, Linda. Bye, Rob. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Monica.